coming tonight to our all-day, all-night, two-night budget meeting. Thank you very much for accommodating the schedule. What we don't do tonight, we'll finish up Wednesday night. I want to thank all of you for the time and assistance you've given us at the Warrant Committee. We've had many new members this year. It's been a very good training opportunity for all of us, including myself, who has never sat in this chair before. So I appreciate each and every one of you, the time you've taken to help us, the explanations you provided, and particularly your patience. I'd like to thank the Warrant Committee members. I have a fantastic group. Everybody's on hold. Everybody's enthusiastic and has done a terrific job making sure that all the budgets we've done our due diligence. And then some. Thank you very much. And last of all, I would like to thank Tricia Cahill for her superb organizing skills and for getting all of you in here for our department meetings. So without any further ado, tonight we'll start with our revenue tab. We can only go so far tonight because we won't have all the budgets in tonight, but we'll get through our revenue. We'll get through our initial expenditures up through controllable and non-controllable budgets. Wednesday night we'll have the rest of the departments, and at that point we will start allocating excess operational and one-time money. The least night we can get through the basics, we can get through our basic budgets, and you can see how much money we do have to appropriate. Okay, so we'll start with the revenue. And if you look at if you look at column H, which is where we're actually going to start tonight. We compare a little bit with column D, which was our final revenue last year. Column G is the revenue with the free cash with the local aid that the governor reported the other night. But we're going to use and focus on column H. So first of all, the $62,453,928 was provided to us by the town accountant and assessor. That was the number that was submitted for the tax recapitulation number and thought to be a good starting point. The next cell down, the $1.561348 million, is our Prop 2.5 addition. New growth, we have $350,000. If you want to compare that to column D, we've actually gone up $50,000 from last year, which is much appreciated. But a 3-year average of the past new growth amounts has been actually over 350. It's been about 385. So Jeff, town assessor, thought 350 was a good number to go with this year. Our subtotal is $64,365,276. Debt exclusion and bond premiums and workers' comp. These were numbers provided by the town accountant. A little bit of a change from last year. So subtotal $2,214,124, and a maximum allowed levy limit $66,579,400. Local receipts. These were also provided by the town accountant. In most cases, we're pretty much level with last year, but any adjustments were felt warranted by the town accountant. So indirect cost for reimbursement water sewer, we actually don't have that final number yet, but we're holding $920,000 as an estimate. Motor vehicle tax, $2.875 million. Other excise, $3,000. Penalties and interest, $400,000. Pilot program, $70,000. Trash stickers, $975,000. Fees, $70,000. Department revenue cemeteries, $370,000. Licenses and permits, $136.50. Fines and forfeitures, $600,000. Interest income, $200,000, and interest income, $35,000. Hope I said that right. Then we also have meals tax at this point estimated at $115,000.
Gina, Amy, did you?
Gina, I think you were just off the line with the
Right.
descriptions and the amounts. You skipped the other departmental revenue.
Okay.
And I don't know if that makes a difference to
Yeah,
anybody,
that
but
does.
the numbers were right, but the descriptions were off.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me just tilt this so I can see better. Where are we? I'm sorry.
Line 2018.
Thanks. So other departments, 136,050, is that the correction? Okay. Fines and forfeitures, 600.
Let's see, licenses and permits.
Sorry, yes, sorry, I'll do it this way. Licenses and permits, 600. Fines and forfeitures, 200. Interest income, 35,000. Local meals tax, 115. Better? Okay, thank you. Total, subtotal local receipts, $6,769,050. Our next section is state aid. Again, in column G, you can see the numbers that were recently presented us from Governor Duval on cherry sheets. In discussions with prior warrant committee chairs and other financial people of the town, it was felt that those initial numbers were optimistic and that we should hold state aid at between 98 and 100% of fiscal year 13 numbers. What we finally ended up on was 98.9%, and the reason we did that is because that's what last year's chair did. So we were right in the ballpark, and we felt it was a good estimate of that, what we can expect. Chapter 70 is $5,702,503. Charter tuition, $6,364. School lunch offset, $25,460. Total $5,734,327. General municipal aid, $2.687 million. This annual formula local aid, this is actually a new item that may come to us this year from the state. The estimate was $75,000, but again, with talking to other chairs, it was felt that at this point it may not be a number that we can depend on, so we wanted to be conservative at this point and not use it. The veterans benefits, $105,908. Exemptions, $112,312. State-owned land, $558,293. Library grant, $21,833. Total state aid, $9,220,540. Okay. Other available funds, leash law, we're holding at $1,400. Overlay reserve, we've gone up quite a bit from last year to $462,697. Free cash, $2,238,335. School building project, $707,140. And we have received a donation from the Copeland Fund in the amount of $175,000 to purchase new land for the cemetery. Subtotal available funds, $3,584,572. Total revenue less water and sewer, $86,153,562. We do not have final water and water and sewer enterprise funds yet, so we're just holding level at this year. We usually don't count that in our revenue for appropriations because it'll be offset by the expense. So what we have for appropriation this year is $86,153,562. And I've put together a spreadsheet. I'm going to start you looking at it now so you can get used to looking at it. And we'll build as we go. In the upper left-hand corner, cell B7, you'll see that number that I just quoted, $86,153,562. One thing I would like to touch base on before we go any further is treatment of some of the money of one-time money. The Warrant Committee in the past 2 years has been putting aside money in the stabilization fund for such a year as this year when we didn't have enough money for operating expenses. That amount was $871,972. It's in Article 29 of the 2012 warrant. But similar to last year, even though we need this money, we're not going to take it out of the stabilization fund. We've had very strong advice from bond counsel that the bond rating agencies do not look favorably upon towns that take money in and out of a stabilization fund, that you should put it in there and really save it for a real rainy day. So What was done last year and we're going to do this year, we are going to use, instead of taking that 871 out of the stabilization fund, we're just going to reclassify some of the one-time money, 871,972 of it, for operating funds. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see this overlay free cash total is $2.7,001,032. We will take out the money that we'll put into operating funds from the one-time money, switching it over. So our balance for one-time money will be $1,829,060. Okay. So at this time, I would like to recognize department heads to come up. We've already had discussions with you, but for the purposes of the video, people at home, just give us a little bit rundown of your budget and requests that you may have for one-time money or other operational money that you may need. So I'll invite anyone to come up first. Jeff.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the biggest item in the assessor's budget this year is a $115,000 request for revaluation services for 2016. We're required to revalue the town every 3 years with visiting every property, every 9 years. In this case, it's 10 years, and we've got an estimate of $115,000 a year. We're trying to spread that over a 3-year period, so we're not trying to appropriate that money at one time. As far as the rest of the budget goes, I guess my first budget was above the level dollar. I submitted a level dollar budget, and we'd have to absorb a step increase and some longevity and some expenses. The expense budget's a small budget. Last year, it was $19,503. Other than the reval money, requesting, I would need $2,300 to have a level service budget from last year. And that would go towards contractual obligations and some expenses.
Okay. And one-time expenses, or you're all set? One-time expenses? I think we're all set. What was the 4,000? Is that the RFT?
Well, that's,
Yeah.
We
We're
do
talking about-
anticipate an RFT for $4,000.
yes, that's correct.
And we are going to want to keep track of that from anybody else who steps up
Right.
to reconfirm that, because we're going to have to appropriate some extra for this spring
Okay.
from available.
My board wasn't able to meet yet, so that's on our agenda, and I'll forward that to you as soon as
We're
I...
holding 4,000, I think, for you. We're holding on our
Okay.
list.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Lonnie, you're getting up to come up, or? Jim?
Okay, my budget's pretty simple, but it's always underfunded. Postage this year, last year, the actual number was $27,979, and this year, postage went up a penny. So next year, in order to do the same amount of mailings, which I have to, bills is all I mail out, is $28,600. That's the math I did using that one penny. If you go down to the actual numbers from 2012, I mean, they're fixed costs, envelopes, forms, postage, dues, they're all fixed costs. So I mean, 2012 plus a penny for the postage is all we're looking for. One-time cost, the employees requested new chairs. It's 4 employees, they're looking for new chairs, and I think it was $183 per chair. The chairs they're using now, we confiscated from the accounting department when they got new chairs. So they're pretty worn at this point. Also, this year I became a certified treasurer. And when the clerk became certified, the town adopted a provision that they give $1,000 for certification. That's in the Mass General Law. So this year I became certified, so I appreciate giving consideration. You said to bring the certificate, to show the certificate, and there it is.
Sure.
I'm certified.
You can turn it, like, pull it up.
And that's about it. Any questions?
All set? Thank you.
Are you bringing us an RFP this spring?
I will be. Right now, postage appropriated was $17,542. I need $28.60 at the mail out. So I'll be looking for roughly about $10,000 there. I might need a little for forms and envelopes also, because they're also underfunded. So we're probably about $11,000. But we'll know better after the excise tax goes out at the end of February.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Thanks, guys.
Peter and Ted, I just have a quick question for you
Sure.
guys. Regarding the treasurer's budget, the
Assessor.
assessor's budget, the 115,000 request for reevaluation,
Yeah,
That's the breakdown over 3 years of the 300 million, and 45,000.
yes.
where is it, where, did he absorb that in his?
No, there's a separate line item.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was that on our list?
Yes.
It's in his expense,
No.
so that's it.
It's in the revenue spreadsheet, so it's part of our, or excuse me, part of our expenditures. We have a separate line item this year.
Oh, okay.
We'll carry it for 2 more years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we did
Okay.
it that way.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Town clerk, go ahead.
So I presented a level dollar budget, with being absorbed, 3,695 was absorbed by salaries and longevity. I took all of that amount out of office supplies. If the budget was absorbed, if the salaries and longevity was absorbed, I'm requesting that dollar amount to be put back in, plus an additional amount so I can get certification and start the certification process for being municipal clerk.
Do we have that down?
I don't know that we have that
Do
down.
you have,
Yeah.
how much
I
is
think we
that?
did talk about
Okay.
that when we met. It's under meeting expenses.
So we can add that to our list.
And
General
what was
expenses,
the
Susan?
cost of that, Susan?
$500 for that. And then under professional services, there was 1,500 additional asked, and that is an estimate as to how many people would be on the ballot for town meeting for next year.
So,
We pay per line,
right, for election.
per election, so it's a guesstimate.
Okay.
And that's on top of, Susan, the, let's see, we have down the fireproof file cabinet was a request that you had?
That was a capital expense.
Yep. And that's still the 4,150 for the file cabinet?
That was taken off of this.
Oh, that was taken off.
Yes, for the capital.
Some general
So,
expense, that's covered under
You
capital now?
don't feel you need the fireproof file
Well, that,
cabinets?
when the capital was put through, that was included in that cost.
So the capital committee has taken it on?
Right.
So the,
I didn't think that was the case. I thought you were getting money from the capital committee for
Built-ins and file
carpeting and built-in
in file cabinet.
and file cabinets.
Yep,
And
all of
fireproof file cabinets.
Yep.
And they'll fit into that budget?
So we can cross that off.
I'm surprised. But we can, great,
Would you check that?
we might want to check that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question,
Oh,
Susan.
sure.
I know the other thing we had down was the record management automation.
That was for my one-time.
Yeah.
And what that would be is to, it's $5,000, and it would be to try and get some of the records automated. 99% of all our records are still paper. Majority still have to remain paper,
Mhm.
but indexes and such could be automated and streamline the process and make it a lot more transparent.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, come on. Hi.
Joe Prondak, Building Commissioner.
Yeah, I think so too.
And basically, with preparing our budget, we started with a level-funded budget of $348,000 roughly. The biggest cut was in an overtime budget, which is a fairly new item for us. When our full-time wiring inspector retired, we were able to reduce the hours of that position to part-time. But because it's part-time in a lower level, we're obligated to pay overtime if a person gets called out for emergencies. So I think we were able to absorb that fairly well and may not even need that back. Again, because it was a first-time overtime budget, we didn't know how much we would need. So, but then, so after the level funding, then we are requesting an additional part-time inspector. That added $27,000 to the level funded number. That position, as I've explained in the past, is much needed. I believe it's supported by all three selectmen and the personnel board.
Questions?
Joe, can you just tell us by potentially adding this new employee what the benefits are for the citizens of the town?
The benefits are that we are getting the permits out within the required time frame. As I've explained at the last hearing, that our permit numbers have almost doubled since 2001. The workload has just increased that much. We're mandated under the state building code and the zoning bylaw to turn permits around within 30 days. Not necessarily issue them, but review them, get them back for comments.
And is that not happening right now?
We're right up against the 30-day. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And you know, if you think about it, people who want to put additions on their houses or build new homes or even substantial renovations, it's usually a big commitment, and they want to get things going as quickly as possible. So it's important to get that out. We also do, you know, it's pretty well focused pretty well spread out over all of the duties that we do, but one of them certainly is, you know, in the fee collection process, there's a lot of review that happens there. You know, in the past, in a lot of cities and towns, people that declare, our permits, all of our permits are based on the value of the work, the percentage of the value, and in order to adequately collect those fees, we have to review the contracts and actually ask people, you know, what the true value is, because it's pretty common throughout the state, I think, that those are numbers that are, let's just say, lowballed.
Would there be any other efficiencies that could be done within the department to help speed along the process besides adding a new employee?
Well, what would happen is the new employee would be doing more inspections out in the field, and that would give me more time to stay in the office and do the reviews quicker. It's really a staffing issue, and the more time I can spend in the office reviewing permits and plans, the faster I can turn things around. And it's also the other you know, big item that we do is zoning enforcement, and that, as you know, is very helpful to the protection of property values and reduction of blight within the town. So it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of detailed notes, because potentially all of our zoning violations can be processed in a criminal court, so we have to treat it. That's although most of them don't end up there, we don't know which ones, so we have to take very detailed notes and be very conscientious of the procedure along the way.
Okay. Other questions? Ted?
Yeah, don't think we asked you when you were here before. How much of your time has been taken up with the Hendricks building?
Oh, Over the past several months, I'd have to guess, but I would say in hours, hundreds.
So if you didn't have that hanging over you, you might not need that part-time inspector quite so much. Is that right?
Maybe not quite so much, but again, the permit numbers speak for themselves. We've literally doubled in 10 years, and the staffing level is the same as it was 10 years ago. And I also think, that we'd be able to improve on our zoning enforcement or zoning administration, and maybe speed up the time process that it takes to get resolution on those. But yes, there's no doubt the Henry's building takes an awful lot of time, and we've got a long way to go, too, I believe.
Fred?
Joe, can you speak to the idea that a position would be self-funding?
Well, again, it's very difficult to put a number to that, because we simply don't know how many building permits are going to be pulled in a particular year. We don't know how much people are going to spend on additions and new homes and all of that. What we can do is just assume that because we're going to have we would have another set of eyes in the field, that we would, be getting a better handle on construction that goes on without permits. So that would be one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it, as I touched on before, is the actual review of the actual costs of a particular project, the declared values. And we also, when a project is complete, some of the larger projects, we do ask for cost affidavits at the end. And again, that requires a lot of review. So it's very hard just to say just how much we can anticipate as revenue is generated. There's really no good answer to that.
Okay.
But I think it's clear that we've been revenue positive over the past number of years, and somewhat a little bit of common sense has to be applied to that. That another staff person, another set of eyes could add to that.
Questions? Kevin?
Joe, I'm sorry if you answered this before, I wasn't here when you came. What is the replacement inspector?
Replacement inspector is, that's for plumbing, when Mark Kelly is on vacation or out sick.
Okay.
We have a replacement inspector that comes in
Okay, I
and fills in
thought so.
for
All
him.
right, thanks.
Cheryl?
Joe, you mentioned that zoning enforcement is a large part of what you do. So if you had to say that your current inspections, how much of the time, let's say 50%, 80% was related to zoning, or how much is related to the actual building permits?
If I had to put a guess, I would say 60 to 65% of our time is spent on building permits and 35 to 40% on zoning.
Okay.
Again, it's a guess, but somewhat educated guess.
And of the permits, the nature of most of them is renovations to existing homes?
Yes.
So how many permits would you say for new construction last year?
For new homes, let me, excuse me 1 second. The number of new homes is definitely up. Back in the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, there were, as I remember, and again, this is all from memory, there were about 25 new homes constructed per year in the town. Up until about 2008, 2010, that dropped to 2 or 3. And then they've been steadily increasing. I think the number is 11 or 12 that we had last year. So that high on new homes that really went down to a valley is on its way back up again.
And were there any commercial permits last year?
Nothing substantial like a 36 Central Ave or or like the Science Center at Milton Academy. Nothing substantial that would have caused a spike in our numbers.
So you would say then that last year might be a typical year in terms of the volume of business through the inspectional services?
Yes, with the anticipation that it's going to continue to grow.
And the part that you anticipate continuing to grow is in the single-family new homes or in the renovations?
I think it's primarily renovations and additions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thanks, folks.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Would like to come up and speak next?
I neglected to tell you about my RFP for the elections and, so, as we discussed last time, there are going to be 2 additional elections.
Okay.
One of which is going to fall on April 30th, which is our town election. Even though they will be combined on the same day, theoretically, they are 2 separate elections. Some of the costs can be contained together, but there will be additional costs.
Okay.
So I've been working with Anne Marie and Amy. We've come up with a figure of $45,000.
$45,000?
For the
Last
2.
time you told us it was $14,000? It's quite a big chunk.
That might have been just what I was estimating
Okay.
for
you
mine.
think it's
This is
45?
combined for all. So that would include poll workers, DPW, ballots, rental of trucks, everything that it takes to run the election.
Carolyn?
Does that include the police? Because I know police had mentioned that they're
That
gonna
does
need-
not include
That does not
police.
include
Okay.
police.
Question. Jono?
Does that include any state kickback from?
That does not include any kickback, and it's my understanding, they haven't given figures or anything like that, but there will be a reimbursement, probably after the elections occur. But,
Most likely falling to free cash.
Yeah, so it's gonna be 45, we pay out 45 and hopefully some of that will flow back going into
Absolutely.
statewide election.
that's correct.
Other questions? Sharon?
This is RFT for a
Extra money.
special election in April?
2 elections.
2 elections in April?
2 elections, one's in April, one's in June. So we have a primary that falls on the same day as our town election, and the state election, or special state election, which is June 25th.
Okay. Ted?
Since we already have an election on April 30th anyway, can you break down that 45 between the 2 dates, the one we already had?
I can, but I can't, I don't have those figures. I'd have to get back to you. I just estimated,
Because we've already budgeted for the
That's-
one election on April
right.
30th, and I'm wondering, how much more expensive that one will be
yep,
compared to having a standalone date.
right. I did not separate it that way, but I certainly can and get that to you.
Yeah, because it just seems like 45,000 is an awful lot for 1.5 elections. Doesn't kind of line up with the other elections. I don't think. Can you remind me what we had?
Well, we had 14 for the RFT.
Can you remind me what we had in the budget for elections?
It's around 14, I think.
No, that was the RFT.
That was the previous
I think,
RFT estimate.
No, I know, but I think it's, let me just find the clerk's budget.
It's under E&R. No.
Town clerk, oh, you want
Line
elections?
28.
Close budget.
Okay.
Well, yeah, 50,000.
So that was 52 for 2 elections? For 3 elections?
Can I just, Ted,
Yeah.
there was actual, that was level with last year, 52,000, but then there was a 30,000 reduction in the budget because we were only, your budget was only anticipating 1 election this year, so.
For the upcoming, right, for
So
2014.
their budget was actually 21,852 for 1 election, so.
See, I don't administer the E&R budget. So I don't know what the costs were in that. I administer the town clerk's budget, so
Correct.
they're two separate budgets, so we work together to collaborate.
Yes, Amy?
Also, that $45,000 figure includes additional time. So that's a combination number for the E&R and the town clerk to do both of those elections. So if you think of it as we had 21,000 budgeted for one election, that 45,000, we didn't do the breakdown. Some of it would be put into the E&R budget and some of it would be put into the town clerk's budget.
Okay.
To cover some of the administrative time that we'll need to be
Okay.
expending.
Thank you. Other questions? Darnell?
So when's the 21? Is that coming out for that 45? Was that,
21 was their original budget.
that's the original
For
budget?
14.
For 14.
For which election?
That was for the,
So that's for for
Next year.
14, we're talking about 13.
13.
Yeah.
In 13,
yep,
and, you know,
two elections
they're,
that were scheduled for
Yeah.
13. Well,
right.
one state, two
But
statewide.
you still have to separate them, they're just housed on the same day. So like police, the costs, will have a savings in that because we
Right.
would have had the police detail anyways there. But other than the police, you know, some of the poll workers, we have to hire additional poll workers for those days to handle two separate elections. So you're gonna have two check-ins, two checkouts. You know, the wardens and clerks have to tally two separate elections. It's a big undertaking.
Ted?
Okay, so just let me get this straight. The budget for 13 was 52 to cover 3
Yes.
elections,
Correct.
okay? And now we have 2 more elections, or one and a bit, and you need almost double the budget. I mean, it just, I'm missing something here. To go from 52 for 3 elections to 97 for 4.5.
Tom, would you like to?
I think what you're missing is the fact
You're
that
missing-
you're talking two budgets, you're only looking at one
Two
budget,
different
the
years.
E&R budget, and you're talking 45 over 2 budgets. So you have to look at both of them together. Just talking about the town clerk's budget, which will be increased, as well as the E&R budget.
So did the town clerk's budget show a drop for 14 because the expectation was only to have 1 election instead of 3?
No, there's no drop.
There's no drop there, so
It's level.
I don't know what portion is coming out of the town clerk's
Well,
budget.
there's extra manpower, staffing power that's gonna be needed to work overtime.
Right, which should have dropped down in expectation of having only 1 election in 14 instead of 3. But- Okay.
Other questions?
These have 15 elections.
Thank you, Sue.
Okay.
We'll take another budget.
It's not
Jack,
14.
thank you.
It's not 14 budget, that's the problem. 13.
Good evening.
Hi,
13,
Chief.
it's like 14's not changing. It's 13, that's crazy. Rich. Oh, it's perfect.
Tell us a little bit about your budget,
Okay.
one-time requests,
Yep.
and your RFT.
Our requests really come from the fact that we had, prior to the original deadline, submitted a level dollar budget. After we submitted that budget, the town and the firefighters union came to a collective bargaining agreement, and we had to make some adjustments. So off the top, the first thing that we had to do was reduce our new equipment line down to 0 from 20,000. And in past years, we've really, the first 2 years I was here, we were up at $60,000 for new equipment, and that really seems to be the figure that works really well for us. Last year, we were reduced down to 40, and we are running, if not out of that, running low on that at this point in time. So like I said, that $60,000 figure really appears to be the true figure that we should operate from year to year. So The $20,000 really had us squeezed tightly, so to cut that down to zero really puts us in a bad spot. So, like I say, off the top, we would like to get that request put back in. Our original response to your questions as to what we would need beyond that would be another $18,000 in equipment. And we were also looking to add $15,000 to the overtime line and $10,000 to the training line. So when you total all of those together, it's a figure of $63,112.60. Really, none of that is really a one-time thing, it's really more operational.
Right, right. Carolyn?
Chief, I know when we talked about reinstating the 20,000, you kind of itemized the things that you need. I think the top two priorities were the survivor lights.
The survivor lights that's a project that I split between last year and this year, so yeah, that's halfway done. And not necessarily weekly, but monthly, I've got people coming in that their lights are just flat out dying. So yeah, that's pretty critical there. And the gloves beneath it are actually non-compliant. When they were originally manufactured, or when they were originally okayed to be manufactured, between that time and the time they actually went into manufacturing, they changed the materials, and they were no longer compliant. And unfortunately, on our end, that company went out of business. So those gloves really do, and they're operating in them for over a full year now, those gloves really do need to get replaced. What's happening is, in fire situations, they're actually getting second-degree burns on their hands. We haven't seen it here locally, but nationwide, that's what spurred the recall. So those are very high priority. But there again, anything that's on this first list of 20,000, we're missing currently. It's not that we don't have any, but there's engines that are missing a picket axe or flathead axe. So, those would be, we can do without if need be, but that first page is pretty critical. I took a look on the second page even, and if we were really to say that we were gonna cut some things out, the helmet, boots, and no-mix hoods are something you're just kind of estimating at. We do have need there every year, but, in a pinch, we can probably shuffle those around. The turnout gear, I have 6 sets in there. That's probably estimated a bit high, but I know right off the top I'm going to need at least 2. So, we can tweak to a certain extent, but it is all true need.
Okay, and then sorry, Jean. Then, under the new equipment needs on that second page, the portable radio batteries, those were kind of prioritized as your top 2.
Those would be the top, yeah, they are kind of...
turnout gear?
The turnout gear, I have that at the bottom.
Yeah.
But just looking at that tonight before I came over, and I realized that I've got someone coming on that I'm going to need to make that purchase for. So I can downgrade that to 2 sets rather than the 6.
Okay.
But that really should slide up to above the helmets as far as priority goes.
Okay.
Carolyn?
And then, I know we're just trying to get
Yep.
priority with your list. So the other 2 items that you have are overtime, 15,000, and training, 10,000. The overtime would be your second priority on top of the equipment.
The overtime would be the priority in that, yes. We on that end of things, we do overspend the overtime line year to year. Training, we would like to increase, but it's one of those things that we would like to increase it. We can work within those parameters
What you have
at this point.
appropriated,
Right.
okay.
Other questions?
Just the, I don't know if we want to discuss.
Oh,
any
the RFP,
update
I'm
on the
sorry.
RFP?
Actually, I really won't, I won't have an update probably until May for you.
Okay.
Again, hopefully, this week's not helping.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had to up the manpower and everything. But again, hopefully, when we get closer, the truck is back. That was a flat bill. It was, 45, whatever it was. So the RFT won't go up, I can tell you. Well, hopefully nothing else happens that it won't go up. But we will certainly try to bring that down if we can.
So we're holding it at 43, is that too low?
I think it was 43 and change, so that would be fine. That would be fine.
Great.
And if by chance we can let you know earlier than that, but the picture really starts to come together kind of, in May.
Yeah.
So I can't really update you more than that, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Other
you.
questions before we send you off? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tom, come on up.
Thank you, Gene. I just want, because I think there's still some confusion over the town clerk's RFT estimate.
Sure.
And the question was asked, why was FY 14 and 13 in the clerk's budget the same? Well, it was the same as 12 to 13, they're all level dollar budgets. There are 5 elections in 13. There were 2 elections in 12. There'll be 2 elections in, most likely, 1 or 2 in 14. But since you did have level dollar budgets, that's what you got, was a level dollar budget. If you think about the additional costs in the clerk's budget, postage, printing of ballots, and programming of machines, they all have significant costs to them. It has to be done 5 times. The printing has to be done, programming has to be done, postage is probably, the April election, probably no additional cost for postage, there may be, but I would think that would be insignificant. But there are some significant additional costs that are going to hit 13 that were, and because of the nature of a level dollar budget, it's probably always been based on 2 elections, not 5 elections. So that's where the additional cost is going to come in.
Thank you for the clarification, Tom. Thank you. Thank you. Next budget. Who'd like to come up next? Well, I see the library, so we'll take you.
Yeah, so basically, I tallied up what he just said, and this is what he's, I think, and what we've appropriated.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Will Adamsick, I'm the library director. This is Brendan McLaughlin, he's the chair of the Library Board of Trustees. We presented 2 budgets. The first was a level funded budget, which took into account step increases and raises, about a $10,000 increase in the cost of doing business with utilities and maintenance, a slight increase in our membership to the Old Colony Library Network, and then we absorbed most of the cuts in our materials budget, and that brought us to a level funded budget. We also came in with a revised request, which also took into account step raises, the OCLN raises, but the request also included asking the town to fund the entire books and materials budget to the level of $102,000 as compared to $70,000 in fiscal 13. The number is based on the materials expenditure requirement that is a state aid requirement for libraries in the state, and that is how we came to that number. Currently in FY13, we're anticipating having to fundraise about $50,000 to meet our state aid requirement for materials. The other significant increases were about a $12,000 increase in utilities between electricity and water and sewer, and that's really our other major increase.
Okay. Brenda, did you want to add anything to that? or-
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
Question?
That's fine.
Carolyn?
I think one of the questions we had when we were meeting that, after you guys presented Will, was, is there a sprinkler system at the,
Yes.
There is. Because if I'm remembering correctly, we thought the water bill might be a little bit high.
Right.
Has anyone looked into?
Okay, we have 3 separate water meters, the old building, the new building, and the sprinkler system. And so we're looking into how much of that is from the sprinkler system
Okay.
and reducing that.
Okay.
Other questions? Darnell?
When you talk about the material costs, and you did it on your presentation,
Yes.
there was a percent there that you were looking at as your fundraising coverage of that, your material costs. What was that number again? I had the presentation you did, I think.
What, the percentages?
Yeah, the percentage that you were looking at this year for the fundraising portion.
I'm sorry, that's,
We would have to raise $46,000,
Right,
almost
so-
47,
it's a little less than a third.
which would be up from 23 last year.
Right. A little bit less than.
Other questions? Donald? Excuse me.
Still. And we also was looking at, they were starting or looking to start, I know talked about this last year, they're starting to rotate out the number of computer systems that you're looking to
That's right.
replace. My question, where are we with that rotation? And what, I thought it was like 20 systems or something this year. What was the
So we haven't-
rotation procedure at this point set up?
At this point, we haven't done any replacement. We put forth a request to the capital planning committee, which was denied this year. We costed it out, we had a request for $25,000 for this year, 25 for next year, and 20 for the following year to replace approximately 70 machines, public and staff, and some of the printers and such things. As far as one-time costs for this fiscal year, we looked at about $22,600 for replacing 20 machines and some printers. There's no licensing costs involved because we already own the licenses to put the software and the operating systems on the machines, and we maintain our own equipment, so there's no maintenance cost for that either. So we're looking at $22,600 for the first of a 3-year phase.
So when you say you do your own, you're looking to do your own maintenance, is that the maintenance contract you're currently under? Or
We don't have a maintenance contract currently for the public computers. We have a maintenance contract just on a server, but we're not replacing that.
So what are you looking at as far as repairing, and how are you gonna handle repairs as they come up for those, public systems?
We've been doing it in-house for the last 2 years. Just staff has been updating and maintaining them.
Okay, other questions? Rob?
No plan for an RFT, is that still the case?
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, who else do I see out there? School committee, I see you, but you're not presenting tonight, I understand. Bill, did you want to speak tonight at all?
Planning board?
Is Emily going to come Wednesday?
I just talked to her now for the housing production and the master plan.
Okay, we'll get to those, if that's what you want to talk about. For the articles?
Those will be the articles.
Great.
That'll be Wednesday.
We're going to discuss those. I'm sorry, are you ready to discuss those tonight?
No.
Okay,
I'll leave her to do those. I'll do the planning board.
okay.
Yes?
Yes, that's fine.
Joe Lynch is back. Joe's looking for you. He's popping up.
Thank you.
Right? I actually requested a pretty level funded budget. The only raise in there is the longevity for the administrative aid for $125.40. And that's same as last year. There's a, I think, $3 difference.
I have a level.
And we took out, the difference taking out last year was the visioning, which we put under 2 different articles this year, one for the master plan, one for the housing production plan. So they didn't appear in the planning board budget.
Okay, questions? Cheryl, that's your hand.
Yes, on the one-time wish list,
Yes.
I see install drop ceilings and new lights.
Yeah.
Is that in your office?
Yes.
And is that, a recent requirement or a recent request? 'Cause I don't recall.
It's not a recent one on my part.
Okay.
It's been, since I was moved from my corner office over to a smaller office, as you come in that door. Before I had a door that shut and you could shut off. Now I have a door that shuts, but I have no ceiling and everything's open. My discussions taking place there or my phone calls there are broadcast all over the second floor because there is no ceiling. While I'm talking to somebody about their project, I can hear how many, trash stickers or recycling bins somebody wants, or I hear their argument over a water bill, because everything in the back of that building carries. So the ceiling is just a...
Well, the reason I ask about it being recent is because under the consolidated facilities,
Yeah.
there are requests for various improvements to this building as well as other buildings that fall under the capital improvement threshold. So our thought was these really should come in under consolidated facilities rather than planning board, and I think there was maybe another one came in under clerk or
I
whatever.
personally don't care where it comes under if I can get a ceiling.
Okay.
I've
Because-
asked, and it's always been, we'll try to find the money. Well, it's getting to the point now that it's beyond ridiculous. It's silly that you can't have, I have a conversation, I have to get up and go in and, use Bill Ritchie's office, or I have to go down and use one of the selectmen
It's really,
offices or conference room.
My question really isn't about whether you need it or not, it's just really the way we want to channel things through consolidated facilities, because they have the personnel and we have budget and
And
we
they're
have
the ones
budget
who
for
gave
their
me the number
personnel.
for the project, so.
Okay.
If you want to take it from there and put it there, they're going to be in charge of it anyways. I really don't care how it happens, as long as it's on the list. It was a question that when I came here last time, they said, if you had a one-time item, what do you want? I want to see.
It's on the list.
It's on our
I
list.
know, but you asked me what I wanted, and
Okay.
I understand, some of us have voices that carry, and we do understand and appreciate that request, so that's okay.
thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Joe Lynch?
Good evening, how you doing?
Fine, Joe. How are you?
Seems like I was just here a week and a half ago, I think it was,
How's the snow?
maybe even sooner. When I was here, I presented 5 separate budgets, one enterprise water, one enterprise sewer, and then 3 separate budgets that fall within public works, which is DPW general, vehicular maintenance, and solid waste. In an aggregate, you look at those, they are level funded for this year compared to last in the past several years. So they are level funded. I think some of the questions that came up have all been answered, but if there aren't any, I'm here to answer those and hopefully address the possibility of some one-time funding if that is on the table.
Sure. Questions? Sorry, Fred?
I hate to sound like Johnny One Note on the snow and ice, but a couple weeks ago you mentioned that we're already over the current year. And what we're talking about wouldn't impact fiscal year 13, but do you have any estimate of where you're at?
We, at this point, just on this particular storm, we were about 130,000 already to date. There's a strong expectation it's going to be a federally declared disaster, so we hope to recoup 75% of that. If you look at the recouped value, we are probably about 200,000 off of the 150 that's budgeted for snow and ice, but built into the overtime budget includes some overtime for snow and ice. So I think if you look at the reimbursed number, we're still in pretty decent shape. If we don't get reimbursed, we're going to be probably short, $75,000, $80,000 by the end of the fiscal year, assuming a typical winter moving forward. I'm not sure what a typical winter is, by the way.
Cheryl, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Sorry, it was on the one-time request. Can Can you explain the total scope of the reflectivity sign assessments?
Congratulations. As a professional architect, you certainly understand retroreflectivity. What it is simply put, if you look at the signs in town, in the state, and across the country, they need to be able to reflect a certain amount of light on the distinguishing features as they relate to regulatory signs, directional signs, and then informational signs. In a phased-in approach, the MUTCD, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, promulgated through Federal Highway Administration, has come out with a timetable of when each of those thresholds need to be met. Step one is establishing an inventory of all of your signs, so you then can have a plan in place, which is step one of compliance with the new mandate. And there's a phase-in on your regulatory signs first, your directional signs second, and your informational signs third. To Milton's credit, and to the Copeland Foundation's generosity, the town replaced nearly all of its street name signs with the wider, taller, and larger letters, which all meet retroreflectivity. They shine a light on them, they beam right back and you can see them. Every single sign that's regulatory, stop signs, speed limit signs, parking prohibition signs, directional prohibitions of right turn on red, and those things all need to meet those same sort of criteria. An understanding of inventory of what you have, what its current retroreflectivity rating is, and then a plan of how you intend to upgrade those signs to meet their threshold has to be in place. The monies I'm asking for is to put that plan in place. We actually put out an RFP, and we actually have a quote to do this work. I had put $24,000 in because that was the first quote I got, but at this point, we are closer to $19,000 to $20,000 for the product.
Great, good news. Darnell? Sorry, Jane, may I just follow up with that?
I'm sorry. We'll just finish and then, sorry, Darnell.
Just how many years do you expect that to take place over?
The plan needs to be in place by next January.
And then the implementation will come out of the plan, or you?
All regulatory signs and safety signs by June of 2000. Regulatory and warning signs by June 13, 2014 have to be, the plan has to be in place. And then there's about a 3-year ramp up to have them all replaced beyond that, so about 2017 before it's completed. And without the inventory, I can't even begin to tell you what what the total cost is. You figure each stop sign assembly, the sign itself and the hardware, assuming the post and everything's still intact and can be reused, stop sign alone is, $80 a piece, and darn near 80 or more % of all of our stop signs fail to meet retroreflectivity. So that's the first one, and then ultimately the guide signs goes off as far as an implementation plan by 2018.
Okay, well said. Okay, Darnell?
Yeah, my question is going to be, do we have a number on material and plan, like total material plan? I'm just saying that.
There isn't even an inventory. If you ask me today how many stop signs are there in Milton, I can't answer without having someone go out and count them. If you ask how many of those that are out there meet retroreflectivity, we can't tell you that because we don't have a meter to be able to measure them. So this is to get that inventory in place. It'll be integrated into our GIS system. So we'll have a permanent inventory. So in the case of a knockdown or an accident claim, we can actually order it by location and get an exact replacement. And better yet, we can actually develop a capital plan as signs begin to deteriorate over time for future needs.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, Joe, now that we've opened this sign can of worms, what are the requirements, the legal requirements that have to be met in order to place a stop sign?
That's a great question, because I'll tell you what is required. First, in this town, we have an established traffic commission. A recommendation comes down through the Board of Selectmen to look at a situation. The traffic commission will look at that location and formulate a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen will adopt it. There haven't been new stop signs erected here since I've been here in 4 years, but historically, and I know I'm on camera, but historically, the last step is seldom done by any town, and that is Mass Department of Transportation has to approve that stop sign location.
That's what I thought.
Until Mass Department of Transportation accepts a stop sign, it doesn't exist.
How many of those do we have?
Not going there. That's a question you need to ask in executive session. And you have to ask the police chief.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
However, they haven't done, it's not like we have a wholesale installation of stop signs. You know, that is not the case that's happening. We've introduced a pair of stop signs at a mid-block crosswalk on Elliott Street. That in fact did get DOT approval, because in fact we use DOT money to do that work. So that's the only one that I can say was erected new in the 4 years that I've been here. We did take it the full distance.
Other questions? Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
No other one-time requests? That mean they're all approved?
Amy, did you want to come up and?
Sure.
I'm not sure if there are any other departments out there too. Is that it? I don't see any. Carolyn, do you see any from your angle? I can't see behind that pole, so.
No, that's it.
Sorry, I thought it wasn't going to go till the other, till Wednesday or Thursday. So
If
do
you
want
want to
me-
wait, that's fine.
No, that's fine, I don't mind, I'm just going to have to find my notes. Do you want me to just talk about central business?
Yeah,
or-
at this
okay.
point, yes, thank you.
So, your central business office, we had a reclassification of an employee from a level 4, from a level 3 step 2 to a level 4 step 1. And that combined with step and longevity increases was an increase to the budget of $11,382. In order to absorb that into the level dollar budget, I had to pretty much wipe out my general expenses, which was budgeted in fiscal 13 at $29,802, and this year I presented one with $18,420. Of that, the largest piece relates to the professional services for the parking ticket contracts, which that's based upon the number of tickets that are issued and collected. That number I can't really play with that much because I have no control over it. So basically everything besides a little bit of office supplies was wiped out. So in I did go through, and rather than ask for the full $11,382 back, I thought that I could probably get by with $4,380 of that into my operating budget. That was through a reduction of, I think the biggest piece was some of the training costs. I cut that in half now that I've been here for a couple of years. I'm not attending as much training, and same with some of the meeting expenses and whatnot was where most of that was. Plus, I felt comfortable reducing the parking tickets a little bit just from looking at the trend and the number of tickets being issued. The officers appear to probably be focusing more on, not as many tickets issued just due to time. Other than that, the one-time item I was requesting was approximately, $8,500 just to do some additional software improvements to do the integration between the different software modules to make some of the manual processes go away and get more efficient.
Questions? Any questions on the CBO budget? Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. Did you need me to talk about audit or any of the other ones? Audit's not level funded.
I'll go over that one. Okay. I need any help?
I'll be
Stand
down
up.
there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, everybody ready to move on? So at this time, I'd like to take a step back and vote the revenue for fiscal 14.
Jean, just really quick, can I just ask a quick question on that? Just going back to our spreadsheets that we got the other night, which are so helpful.
Sure. Which one?
With the central business office, the general expenses.
Amy, we may,
It's not a question for her, it was a question that, I just want to look at the numbers, so
okay, you want me to put mine?
the amount requested on the reoccurring is 4,380. And then the software was 8,500.
Correct.
And she's getting back.
11,000 something, 484.
Right, she's getting back the steps and lanes.
Well, if that's
If we
voted.
vote
If that is voted.
Right.
So I think just, if we go in that direction, yeah, okay.
Chief Wells?
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah.
You want me to all walk in again? Can we do this all over again?
Good timing.
Irish. No, nothing's cut off. My phone, I thought it was going to stay there.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, we just want to briefly go over your budget for the video and tell us about any one-time requests or operating expense.
We've been kind of laid back. They haven't done anything. Very quiet week. I was on a cruise ship. No, thank you for having me. As you know, we met previously on our budget. I suppose if I just used the past week, I talked a little bit the last time I was here about bumps that just happen that affect our department. And if you just read the news, I think all of you were affected by the storm. Clearly, that incidents of that nature have a significant impact on our department, in specifically operational costs and overtime. If you saw just the one incident that took place at the high school last week while I was gone, those type of operations are massive, to say the least, and they are costly. Do they happen every day? No, but sometimes that talks about the unpredictability about things like overtime and of that nature. So just to give a quick synopsis, working with the Board of Selectmen and coming before you, is everyone in this room knows your police department has been understaffed to the level of 50 officers, which is a -5 officers. This is something that began in 2007 by reducing to 54, and it grew due to budgetary cuts and restrictions to 50. So what you have before you is a budget a level dollar budget that requests increasing the manning level of the Milton Police Department of 53 sworn officers effective July 1st of 2013. The one-time request that I definitely would need, because in order to do that meant reducing overtime $100,000, is, as I've articulated to you before, and to some of you privately as well, that we would need, if there were one-time money, we would need to put that $100,000 back into our overtime line item for FY14. I think that pretty much says it in a nutshell. I think the last thing I would say is that, and I know people are watching at home, we live in a community that has a great quality of life. Be it the schools, be it our streets, our roads, our parks, or our police department. And when it comes to the police department, we're unique in our demographics, we're unique in our geography, we're unique in that we have a quality of life, as I just described, yet we abut 9 miles of the capital of Massachusetts, with all of its urban influences and daily pressures that come associated with that. But given that, from a policing perspective, it requires a lot on our part to maintain that quality of life. And I would be lying if I said to you, to continue working the path we were working at -5 officers each year, that we're doing justice to our citizens, to our town, and especially to the men and women who I think in this town do an excellent job. As much as I was sitting on a cruise ship 3,500 miles away from here, I had all the faith in the world in the men and women who work for this police department, that they would perform exactly the way they did. And if you look at the way we handle the situation and the way they handle the situation, not we, because didn't even have internet service. I did get text messages. They did it exactly in the method and the manner you would expect. And so in that one statement, I would just, it's not that I think that the one-time request they were asking for be put back into our line of budget for 14. And with that, I'd entertain any questions that you have.
Carolyn?
Chief Wells, when you came in, you spoke about aside from the overtime money, potentially some money for cameras? I think it was by the Tedeschi's,
Right,
Houston Ave, kind of that area.
So what I did ask, and we have two initiatives that we're working on. We were very fortunate in FY, I believe 10 or 11, actually 10 and 11, we got about $250,000 from the Department of Homeland Security, which took the City of Boston's Metro Boston Homeland Security camera system, which placed cameras in public areas of the town, which are high-profile areas, the square, the Ville, all of our business districts, Andrews Park, some of our corners like Milton Food Mart, things like that, that we get a lot of calls to them, and gave us the ability to have surveillance. In 10, we received another $90,000 to extend this into Milton High School and some of our schools. So we have two projects on the table. One is a joint project we're working on with Cunningham Park, which is to try and get them, which is a private foundation, to try and get them to begin to extend our camera system into their property. And the second is we do have an initiative where we would like to extend off of the Pierce School, where we also have cameras, and cover the Tedeschi's, Houston Ave area, that area there. So if there was some free cash available, we would like to add that as a possibility.
And it sounds like the cameras are highly effective.
It's not a perfect world, but they've been very effective in numerous cases, and I cite and point a couple of significant events that took place where we were able to get some very good information. One which led to a drug arrest, which information came forward about drug activity taking place in each day in front of a certain store. We had a camera in place there, and we made an arrest very quickly as a result of it. And the other was Andrews Park, where we were going there chronically all the time, especially the parking lot. Once we put cameras into that parking lot, it cut our calls for service dramatically. So in that aspect, it's not a perfect world, but is being either A, from an investigatory point of view, or from a crime point of view, or B, the fact that people know they're on camera, they're just cognizant of it, and it kind of makes our life a lot of it easier.
Carolyn? And if we were able to put some money in for your overtime, would you be willing to use some of that money for this camera system, seeing as it is so effective?
No, because that's apples and oranges.
You wouldn't?
And I'll say, and I'll give it to you, the overtime to me is like gasoline for the car. You know, the minimum number I've given you, when you saw the actual numbers of what overtime actually is, and I gave you numbers for like just the last 2 years, I would not be to the point where to say that cameras could supplant a police officer in a car. Is it something that we're working towards for the future? Is it a tool just as like our print systems, our internet systems, our intranet system that we share with Boston PD? All of those are important tools, but are they at the point where I would say that I would ever want to use any of that to replace a police officer in a car on the street? I would say no. So I use that more as an elective. It's something we're working towards, but it's very difficult for all the department heads that are behind me. You know, we're working in this level dollar, this is I think our third year of it, working in a level dollar budget system, so it's hard to have any growth. The camera system, I have to admit, is growth. The $100,000 for overtime is just survivability. It's as simple as that. You're just trying to survive, to provide the service that we're giving today. It's just, that would be probably the best scenario I could give.
Okay, I'm sure.
Chief, the overtime really goes into recurring rather than one time, right? And one of the things we talked about when you were in before was that one of the things that was driving overtime for this coming budget was the fact that you'd have 5 cadets that wouldn't be,
No.
or 5
We're going to hire,
personnel.
so to do this, I'll do it again. So if we are anticipating 3 vacancies, and we have 1 vacancy and 2 retirements, plus hiring 2 to get it up to 53 officers. So we would hire 5 officers on or about July 1st. And a police officer, unlike a teacher, where the superintendent could hire a teacher today, and essentially that teacher could be in the school on Monday, a police officer, by statute in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is effectively not a police officer until they have completed the prescribed course of training that state mandates. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 26 weeks, plus a 6-week FTO program. You're 6 months into that. So if they begin July 1st, it'll be around Christmas time before we reap the benefit of them. Yet, we'll still be funding to maintain patrol staffing using overtime at that level. But again, as I said, even if you were to I mean, this is your committee. You have the right to fund this or whatever you want. I'm only sitting here as the police chief saying to you, number one, you don't have to look more than a week ago to see the types of things that the police department deals with each and every day. And B, number two, you can only continue to cut so far before you affect the quality of life. I talked a little about the broken windows theory when I was here 2 weeks ago. Once something like the broken windows theory takes grab and takes effect, and apathy begins to creep into a community, be it through education, public safety, public works, whatever the infrastructure of government is, it'd be very difficult for any of us to get that back. So in my case, as I say, it was actually the chair of the Board of Selectmen, Tom Hurley, who suggested to me at first that we cut the overtime in the level dollar, increase the officers to 53, and then in the one-time, and you're right, because it's not going to go away next year. And as I say, just using the most recent cases in the past few days, these are types of incidents and situations that we deal with every day. Do we advertise it? No. But I think if you ask most people who live in this community, they're very comfortable with the response and the protection that they get from the police department.
If I could just try and clarify this for myself then. My notes have it that there are 3 vacancies that are being filled, 1 personnel is moving out of state, and the deputy chief is retiring. So that you'll be filling those 5 positions?
And the second officer is retiring.
Okay.
And
So
then
then,
we're adding 2 more.
so in the following fiscal year, do you anticipate having 5 or 6?
Well, if you remember what I said last time, I anticipate coming back here next year and go through the exact same exercise to get this police department back to the 55 officers that this town spent $50,000 having a comprehensive management study done in 1992 with a manning level that was articulated at that time. And to be honest, as I said when I was here before, if the town were to engage in an independent study again, I think the number would probably be higher than 55. It would be something around 57, 58.
So it's definitely recurring rather than one time in terms of the 100,000.
I guess if you would use semantics, yes, but do I see it going away? Yeah, I say no. For me right now, it's from going to the survivability point, it's 100,000 is one time. Because I can't give you an answer, nor can I give the Board of Selectmen an answer, how we're going to police the community with an overtime budget of $260,000. When you see that the actuals for the last 2 years were closer to $500,000 in both years. I just don't know how you can do it.
And then for this current fiscal year, the RFT, I think we talked about additional election, is that right?
Yes, you're going to have,
Additional
and this
2
is where,
elections.
I think I said, I have one pending that's sitting before the board that they haven't sent forward yet. That's for the presidential election, which we don't usually ask for RFTs for elections because if it's a regular, the regular town election, we absorb that. If it's a presidential election, that's usually covered in part of the RFT of the total election in the presidential election. The difficulty that you have is that I understand what I have to spend weekly, and as I stated when I was here last week, 2 weeks ago, this is generally a time of year where we try to hold back and not spend any overtime because we know we're going to have to spend it as weather gets warmer, people move, people come out, youth activity, all those things. Incidents like last week, between either the storm or just the one incident we had at the high school, they don't help make that. They don't make that endeavor any easier. So I will have that. I didn't anticipate Senator Kerry being made Secretary of State, so that's going to be 1 or 2 elections in this fiscal year. Are they both going to be in this fiscal year?
2.
Yes.
Sounds like they're the same thing.
Like 2.
So I don't,
Same day, right?
I'm not sure, but I would say definitely one of them. I definitely, just when we did it today, just every week we do this exercise, we take all the overtime, we often spread it over the number of weeks. The 8,000, I think it was 80-something hundred that I have pending to ask for the presidential election, I don't see how that can go away. And then we'll have to figure out, maybe I can absorb 1, I'm not sure. We'll see going forward, because those were unanticipated. We didn't anticipate those coming. Although, I think we're good in that One of them's gonna be the town election, yes, so it's only gonna, so we'll see what happens.
And then gas, right?
Yeah, I think, and then our.
The gas?
The gas?
Yeah, the gas is definitely going to
Wait a
come.
minute. Carolyn, you're done with
Oh, sorry.
Donnell?
Yeah, quick question. You have, we're anticipating a vote on longevity, funding back the longevity back to the departments. If that vote is successful, and that longevity money is then, that you already have cut out your budget, will we be able to fund that back into your budget? Will that help with the camera systems there, or will that, because I know kind of,
What longevity?
Steps and lanes.
steps
talking
and
steps and lanes.
and longevity, whatever. It's in there.
Well, anything that you put, anything that's contractual, so if you're talking about putting steps and lanes back that are gonna be contractual to pay for, I'm gonna have to pay them one way or the other.
Well, you already paid, right now in your budget, the way it sits, it's already paid for.
For this year.
For this, for 14, so it's already paid for. So if we vote to basically put that money back into your budget, on
Well, here's
top
what
of
I'd
what you
say.
already have.
I'll say this to you, I'm not positive on that, because I wanna talk to Ian Cronin about it tomorrow. If what you're saying is correct, I would do that. I'll give you my word, I'd say I do that, yeah.
I think that's what we're voting for.
Carolyn?
I was just gonna.
You're holding your breath.
I was just gonna say about the gas RFP. I
So
think
the
that
gas,
was-
right, and the gas, as you know, last year, I was able, I'm very blunt about it, I'm a slave to gasoline. It's as simple as that. We run an all-gas fleet, there's really no other way around it, we've tried other methods, it's just, we have converted all the administrative fleet to 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder cars, and we're now starting to move the marked fleet towards 6-cylinder cars. But the instability of gas prices, and as we saw what took place last year, where it increased $2 a gallon in the bid over the year at 3,500 gallons a month, is like a shot that you can't absorb. I was fortunate last year, as I said, that the ACO retired, and we had a new ACO, so the difference between a P1 new ACO and a veteran, a P5, was $17,000, and we put that into the gas. I don't have that luxury this year because my level dollar budget reflected a P2 ACO versus a P5 ACO. I would say at least 15. I would not anticipate having to ask for more than 25, because I think what I've done in the past, and I talked a little about this, about paying it forward, is that you try and take that June delivery and don't take it until as late as you can and bill it, and don't get billed for it until July. But that's I'd say at least 15, as high as 25.
Jen?
No, that was my question.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much.
That's it?
That's it? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Richard.
I'd like to take a step back to the revenue, and we've already discussed all the pieces, and I would just like to, at this point, take a vote that we accept this revenue figure.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? It's, unanimous, Tricia? Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to go to the expenditure tab and talk about level budgets and move on to non-controllable additions to budgets. We won't be able to go any further on operating expenses tonight because we haven't heard from all departments. They're not all present tonight. So our allocations for operating money will finish on Wednesday evening. So what we originally asked for from each department were level dollar budgets. We were able to do that. The school department gave us a larger budget, but for purposes of this column, I want to show you what a level dollar is. Total education, we're holding at 36,202. Health, safety, and public works, 16,113,41. Couldn't skip one. Total administration and finance, 3.298011 million. Benefits and insurance, 14,837,034. Total public services, 2.389134 million. Total capital in debt, you'll see that I didn't put in one-time capital needs at this point simply because we haven't voted them. So they'll go in on Wednesday night. Let's see. Everything else is the same. I just want to note the stabilization fund money is a little bit different from last year. That's because last year we have a formula in place to put 2/6 of revenue minus water and sewer expenditures. So that's what we have in the stabilization fund here in cell L80. Last year was a little bit bigger because we got state aid after our warrant was written, and we added that into the stabilization fund. We're putting 1/6 into both the capital stabilization fund and the GASB stabilization funds. So I guess you can think of those as level formula. Our total expenditures, $81,410,984. I'd like to take a vote on that, warrant committee. We accept those expenditures.
So
Level
moved.
dollar.
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor?
Cheryl.
Cheryl there. Okay, thank you. Unanimous. And then, I'd like to show you some of the budgets that are increasing, which we have no control over the creases. So let's go down one by one. First is the Blue Hills Regional School. We do not have a final budget from them. They'll be coming into the warrant committee March 4th to talk to us about their budget. But in talking with David Prohl, he thought that holding this year's budget at last year's times 5% would be a fairly good estimate for our expectation for fiscal 14. Board of Assessors budget is going up $10,200. $8,000 of that is for a GASB study that we need to do every second year, Amy, for our other post-employee benefit plans.
This is audit?
Audit.
I'm sorry, audit, yes.
I'm sorry. Question?
8,000 for the GASB report? Out of the-
Yeah, I moved it out of, which I misspoke earlier, I moved it out of central business
Okay.
to audit. 'Cause
Yep.
Audit was more reasonable there.
The other 2,200 is an increase in the cost of the audit. It's a bill we have to pay. Under the assessors, you'll see an increase of 115,000. The assessor talked to us earlier tonight about that. It's the first of 3 level payments, one in 14, one in 15, and one in 16, to cover the cost of the town reevaluation that must occur every 9, 10 years. I'm not quite clear on that. Next one, you'll see a drop in election and registration. Our initial budget that we were given was $21,852 for fiscal 14. And that represents 2 less elections at the time the budget was given to us. Now we know that will have to be increased in some way, whether it's the budget or whether it's a reserve fund transfer or however we do it. Group health insurance went up $461,905. Our retirement appropriation went up $181,846. A council on aging budget dropped by $12,000, and this was for the employee who is now, her health insurance will now be paid out of the health trust fund, is my understanding of it. And we were able to drop that out of the council on aging budget. Park department initially goes down $1,659 due to the rehire of or turnover of a employment position. And just let me get back to where I was. Let me do that. If you look at line O57, we were provided with debt service amount for fiscal 14 of $134,091 less than last year. State assessments are up $52,000, and we are holding that level that is the actual assessment this year. Where it's higher than last year, we decided to be conservative and put that in at the higher amount. Same with the county assessment, up $445. Total reserves, total increase in expenditures, 600, for non-controllable budgets now, $682,941. Add that to our previously voted revenue of $81,410,984, brings us to the wrong column. Right here. $82,093,925 is our total expenditures prior to any adjustments for steps, longevity, or putting money back for recurring expenses. So I'd like to direct you to the spreadsheet again that we started a little while ago. Here's our revenue, $86,153,562. Total expenditures plus non-controllable expenses, $82,093,925. The difference is $4,059,637. That is what we have to appropriate between operating budgets and one-time items. The split of that $459,000 is $1.829,060,000, which we calculated over here in cell E18. The difference between the initial difference in that amount is $2.230577. That amount is what we have to appropriate for operating budgets. We're not going to go any further tonight on operating budgets because we haven't heard from all the departments. So once we hear from that on Wednesday night, then we will start allocating that money. But what we can do tonight is start allocating, appropriating money for some of the articles that were submitted to us for appropriations. So if people are here to talk to them, I would love to have them come up. I think East Milton Square study will be Wednesday. Did you want to do that, Tom, or leave that to Bill?
It's up to you.
No, leave it to Bill, I think. Master plan, we will leave the planning board. Tom, would you like to come up and talk about the appropriation for firefighter Pickens, the stabilization fund? You can tell us a little bit about it and the appropriation that you're looking for. I'm going to pass. I'll probably spit it out.
What are you doing?
Great, good to have you back, Tom.
Yeah, I know, it seems like I've been back.
Did you miss this chair?
Okay, so the firefighter Pickens, there are two warrant articles that are going to deal with that. One is a home rule petition article which deals with firefighter Pickens' medical expenses on a go-forward basis, and the other one is an article to deal with his medical expenses for the next 2 fiscal years, which is what we believe it will be until the home rule petition is approved. So let me talk about the home rule petition first. We got pushback at town meeting last year, and I think rightly so, and also from the Department of Revenue this year on the fact that we have been bonding firefighter Pickens' medical expenses for quite a few years now. It was thought only to be a temporary measure, and that we will come up with some other solution, and we've been doing it over 5 years now. The debt service for fiscal year 13, for fiscal year 14 on that, on what we bonded to date for his medical expenses will be somewhere in the order of $230,000, $240,000. So it's getting to be a substantial number. We figure on average the medical costs on an annual basis are about $500,000 a year. I mean, some years more, some years less, but on average about $500,000. So the idea that we came up with the help of the Department of Revenue and kind of talking it through was to set up a kind of unique override vote. And basically what it would do, and it does require a home rule petition because it's not the standard run-of-the-mill override vote. What it would do would be to set up a special purpose fund, put $500,000 in that fund, and the purpose of the special purpose fund would be to fund firefighter Pickens' medical expenses for any given fiscal year. That $500,000 would be raised through an override vote. So there would be an initial override vote of $500,000. Then each year thereafter, for as long as is necessary, the special purpose fund would be replenished. So whatever money was spent down in that special purpose fund would be replenished by a further override, almost like a debt override that it carries from year to year to year, that you have the same amount. This wouldn't be the same amount as is a debt override from year to year to year, but it would be a varying amount depending upon how much money was needed, but could never be more than the $500,000 that the voters initially approve as the override. So it could be $300,000 in a year, it could be $400,000, it could even be $500,000, but it couldn't be more than $500,000. In the special purpose fund, any interest that is earned on that fund will also be added to the fund and be available for use. And then at the end of time, when the fund is no longer needed, anything left in the fund will be returned to the voters in the form of a reduction in the tax levy.
Okay.
So that's the gist of it. We think as typically to get a home rule petition through the legislature takes at a minimum a year. So that's why we're figuring it probably won't be available for won't be available for 14. It might not be available for 15. By the time you get it on a ballot, because it's a normal override vote, it would have to go out to the voters and be approved. We're figuring probably FY16 at the earliest. So that brings us to the second article, which would be what do we do for the next 2 years? There is, again, town meeting, I don't believe, wants to see us bond any additional monies, nor does the Department of Revenue. They do not really want to see any further bonding. So the only place left is to come out of the operating budget with that money, $500,000 a year. So the warrant article is asking basically to appropriate money for to put in a fund for the 2 fiscal years. And we're figuring that would be, again, $500,000 a year or $1 million would be our estimate. The warrant committee can choose to just fund 1 year and worry about FY15 in 15. So that decision is going to be up to the recommendation of the warrant committee.
Okay, so for warrant committee, I'd like to take a motion to put this on the table to discuss. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Are you looking for a motion to discuss or a motion for a funding amount?
For both. So take a motion to appropriate, the motion is $1 million, and then we'll discuss it. I'll need a second and then a discussion.
Okay, I'll make the motion to recommend appropriating $1 million for the purposes of the Firefighter Pickens Stabilization Fund.
Second. Okay. Discussion. Don't know.
Because of what our financial situations are now and what we're looking at going into FY15, I was looking to, and my main recommendations against this is basically funding the first year and putting additional $500,000 into like a stabilization. because it does two things. One, it offers us some protection going into 15 in our 15 budget, because right now there is very little to no protection for 15, and I see a lot of cuts coming. And two, it also gives us an idea where we're going to have to be as far as where this home rule petition is actually at. At this point, we're looking at 16. We don't know where it's at this point and where it's going to be. So I would rather have the money available for us to make decisions with, as opposed to putting it into this article, right, all of the money into this article right now, and then, we're stuck, and it could be stuck in limbo as well. So that's what I'm looking at right now.
Carolyn?
I don't have any.
Okay, Ted? Wells, Rob?
Yeah, hey, Tom. Do you see, or what might you see as a downside to only funding it for $500,000? And a corollary would be, down the road, if there are expenses greater than $500,000 in any given year, what do you see as the mechanism to handle that?
Well, I guess first to get to Darnell's point, I think that is exactly what would happen by this article. Obviously, you can only fund for FY15. If you're going to fund medical expenses, you can't fund them in advance for another fiscal year. So necessarily, it would be funding some of it for FY15 and the rest in some kind of a stabilization fund. Probably have to be revoted again the next fiscal year, but at least you would have set the money aside for it. But then it would require presumably a 2/3 vote of town meeting to get it out. The alternative is just not put in a stabilization fund, fund $500,000 for FY14, and worry about the other $500,000 in FY15. The downside of that is if we don't have free cash or some other source of revenue besides the tax levy, it will probably have an impact on operating budgets for that year. So that's the only downside. If you put it in a stabilization fund, then you kind of know it's there.
So down the road, let's say we put the $1 million in as and set it all up down the road. If Mr. Pickens' costs exceed $500,000, then it would necessarily impact operating budget.
Absolutely. And that'll be true also under the home rule petition article if in any given year the medical expenses exceeded the $500,000 that was in the special purpose fund, the balance of it would have to come out of an operating budget someplace, yeah.
Rob?
Two quick questions on the home rule petition. Did the Department of Revenue give you any indication, or through your thoughts of your own, of how likely it is to get through the legislature?
No, they have no control over that. Obviously, it's the legislature. I would think that we'd probably get a favorable response from the legislature, and we've got a favorable response on the allowing us to bond it. I can't imagine them turning us down. I mean, similar things have been done in, I forget what the other town was that had a similar, Dartmouth, yes. And it was somewhat similar. It was an override type of thing that they were able to do.
And if the decision was to fund the 2 years and the home rule petition were to come earlier, would that second year $500,000 move into free cash?
No, it would be in a stabilization
fund.
It would stay. So you'd have to, you'd need a 2/3 vote to pull it out of stabilization
and use it for something else.
Use it for something else, yeah.
Okay, Darnell?
And that was the main question, what other towns might have gone through this process, and do we have a clue of how long it took for that to happen?
Yeah, I don't think this was a home rule petition, so in Dartmouth, I don't believe so. I know Anne Marie had talked to, it's too bad Anne Marie isn't here tonight, but she's under the weather tonight, unfortunately. But I believe she has talked to the people in Dartmouth as to their procedure, but my understanding is it was not a home rule petition. But it was some sort of an override vote that did it. Otherwise, they were even a smaller community than us, and they were looking at similar kind of dollars, and it was just bankrupting there.
You, go ahead.
And what is the, right now, what is the total debt that we have out, bonded out for Pickens, do you know?
The total amount of debt, I think it's, Amy probably has a better idea, but I think it's about $2.5 million. Does that sound about right, Amy?
That sounds about right. And going into 2014, the debt service on that debt will be close to $250,000.
Yes, a quarter million.
Yeah.
So my question, to follow up on that, as opposed to having a sliding scale, the sliding scale, that use additional funds for canceling out that debt. Why don't we have, doing it overnight, using those funds, just a set straight number, and then outside that, just 300,000 1 year, 200,000 goes to canceling out that debt, as opposed to,
We could in fact do that.
having this sliding scale of funds and everything else. You know what the tax bill, you know what it is, you know what's going on. Let's get rid of the debt, so that way it's done.
We could in fact do that. I mean, if you were just to go for a straight override, I don't think that would require a home rule petition, because that would be a fixed amount. I'd have to confirm that with town council, but I don't believe it would be. So if we wanted to go that route, then it would just be an override vote.
And we didn't have to go through all the legislative.
You might not, right.
Yeah, so I mean, so that to me would make sense, because now we can peg it for a vote. We can not have to worry about getting approval from legislation or anything else. And the town knows where any additional funds are actually going right off the bat. And we're retiring debt, and that's like seems to be a big buzzword for everybody.
Right.
Would that make it a lot simpler process?
It might. Now, I guess the thing we have to say, I mean, I have no problem going either way, is would a recommendation like that be within the scope of the article? And I'd have to read the article again, and because obviously that's all we have in front of us right now is that article.
Yeah, I'm just asking. Is that what just that?
As long as it's not out of scope, the warrant committee could make that the recommendation, because again, the recommendation becomes the motion.
And then we bring all the control home, so we don't have to worry about going outside of town to get this approved.
Right, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, the only thing that, again, might be more appealing to the voter and getting the vote through is the fact that it is capped and could be
Well, I mean,
less.
you're still capped.
You're still capping.
You're still capping at
capping.
500, so it's still capped. It's just that at any times when we don't use all the funds in a particular year, those funds go to reduce debt service, which is at $250,000 a year is a big number.
Right, now they'd always be, we kill two birds with one stone. One, we're canceling out existing debt, and two, we're covering our obligations to farm. Yeah.
And we avoid having to deal with the state, which I think is the biggest part of it.
Well, if the warrant committee wants to go that route, I will check with town council to see if a recommendation on those lines would be still in order. Then,
then we're looking at $500,000 to cover next year, because then we can put it on. We can know it's going to be on set to go on FY.
You would have to put it
town
on.
hall for 14.
Yeah, when would it have to go on the? Would have to go on the ballot when to be available for 15.
It would go on the ballot 14.
Right.
14 would be available
so
for
April,
15.
yeah, it would be.
So I'm saying, so now we're just looking at a $500,000 to figure out what we're gonna do.
That's right.
As opposed to
delay. I mean, I don't think I can't think of a problem with that. Certainly.
What do we do with the million tonight? Kevin.
Yeah, Tom, let's say we go for the home rule petition and the override passes and we establish the special purpose fund. And the state now, are they going to impose some restrictions on us regarding tracking expenses, approving, the process of approving expenses, the administrative costs? Is there going to be, you know, a certain amount of paperwork that requires filing certain reports that in some way would, you know, put a strain on one of our financial departments or lead us to have to maybe hire additional help or a consultant to do any of this? Are we
No.
sure of that?
Yes, there would not be.
Good.
It's no different than any other expenditure, that obviously you have to abide by the law, but, you know, and it's subject to audit, but no different than any other expenditure in the town.
The other question I had was, if we're looking, you know, at putting this override on the ballot, are we coordinating this with any general operating override we may have coming up in the near future? I'm talking more or less politically.
If there were an operating override for FY15, it would hit, actually, it probably would hit the same ballot. Yeah, it probably would. So it would be, but either way, I guess it would probably hit the same ballot. Actually, if you went for the home rule petition, it may be the following, you know, if you had an override, an operating override for 15, that would hit the 14 ballot. And if you went the home rule petition, it may not hit until the FY15 election as opposed to the 14, so it may be a year later. But if you went with Darnell's suggestion and just went for a straight override, then I think, yeah, and you had an operating override 15, they would be on the same ballot. Whether you combine them together or whether you had them as two separate votes, they would be on the same ballot.
Thanks, Tom.
Carolyn?
Darnell, so are you suggesting that we appropriate $500,000 this year?
This year, in anticipation of knowing we have expenses in 14. If we go with the straight override, $500,000 straight override tied to the Pickens financial stuff, then we know it's on the ballot on 14. We put the other $500,000 into the stabilization fund, into our existing stabilization fund, so it's there, and we can make decisions on that the following year. So
we would still be putting $1 million aside. It just would be 500,000 would go into Pickens,
and 500,000
would go into
stabilization. And that way, I think you give yourself a little more flexibility with that second $500,000 than if you just put, you know, $1 million.
If you want yeah, I guess you're right. If you want the override, if you want just a straight override, you would know in FY14
what you have to do.
Yeah. If it doesn't pass, then I guess you got a bigger problem overall, but...
Well, we had a bigger problem townwide over here.
Right.
Now we take operational budgets, but the thing is, I think it gives that second $500,000 us more flexibility, and it gives 15 a little more stability going into it, as far as looking at our overall budget numbers.
Right.
We're in trouble.
Carolyn?
Tom, I'm just curious why that option wasn't looked at.
It was, I had thrown it out originally to the DOR, and they didn't seem to, they put it aside. My idea was a special purpose, to set up a special purpose stabilization fund and fund it with an override vote. The way that works is it is one amount that carries from year to year. The selectmen have the control of increasing it by 2.5% every year, or leaving it the same, or reducing it, but if you reduce it, you can never bring it back up. But the selectmen would have that control in a special purpose stabilization fund of saying, yeah, it's $500,000 every year, and it stays that way, or it's $500,000 plus 2.5 every year. And at the end of time, the selectmen then also have the authority to say, okay, it's over, you know, and without going to another vote of town meeting to rescind it. So it is simple in that sense, but that's what it would most likely have to be, would be a special purpose stabilization fund.
The way I'm describing it.
Yes.
And I'll do it without having the ability to 2.5%, because I think that would be, to me, that would be the turn off for the voter. As far as like, if you say this is what it is, give it, it's very
Right, and
vanilla
if they did that, they'd have
explanation for
to,
everything.
they would have to
People
believe the
understand.
selectmen saying, we control it, we will not be looking for more than $500,000.
But, yeah, it's just like, this was just straight. And that, to me, it just makes it brings the controls back to Milton to do it, and we don't have to worry about outside, or worry about somebody saying yes, or somebody pushing us off for another year. And we're more, we can control those finances a little better.
Okay. Carolyn?
Just to follow up with that, Tom, so Darnell, are you suggesting that it be put on the ballot a year sooner than what they're anticipating?
They anticipate, yes.
You would, well, clearly, if it goes through town meeting and passes, then it will be able to go on the next ballot.
I still don't fully understand why that wasn't looked at.
It
as
was.
an option.
The DOR didn't seem to like it. I threw it out there as an option, the special purpose stabilization fund.
So do you
And-
see some concern with this, if this is the
Well,
route we
DCI,
take?
I mean, DOR really doesn't have any legal control over that. I mean, what we want to do, they said you have to do something. It can't be bonded anymore. They were the opinion that the home rule petition route was the better way to go. But that doesn't mean we have to go that way by any stretch.
We have Cheryl next. Cheryl?
My concern about using such a large chunk of our one-time money to put aside for potential other operating next year is that to take a hit of $500,000 in 1 year for out-of-pocket expenses, for medical expenses, seems a greater risk to the operating budgets of 15, the operating budget of 15. So I would think that by having enough for 2 years, so that it doesn't have the effect of impacting operating budgets for 2 years, gives flexibility to work out options, whether it's Darnell's option or the option that's been presented by the selectmen. But by putting half of it aside for this purpose and half of it aside for other potential operating issues next year seems to be putting into recurring rather than into one time. And we've talked about there's lots of need for recurring, whereas we're looking at one-time monies here, is my understanding with these items.
I just want to speak to that for a second. If we put, as Darnell suggests, if we put it into the regular stabilization fund this year and then turn around and take it out next year, is that going to be an issue with the DOR?
I would think you would, from bond rating agencies and everything, I would think if you're going to put it into a stabilization fund.
You should have a
for
separate
Pickens,
stabilization fund.
You set up
Yeah.
Pickens stabilization fund,
Okay.
and then if there is no need for it, then you ask town meeting to release it.
Would that hurt our bonding if we were next year to go in and pull it out and then?
No, because that's what it's there for. That's what you set it aside
If it
for.
was in the general stabilization fund, though?
In the
Not
general-
one that was set up for this purpose?
Yeah, I think it would,
Okay.
yeah, it would look again like a revolving door if you.
Right. Darnell?
Two things. One, stabilization fund is exactly that. Next year is going to be a very unstable budgetary year for us. I mean,
Correct.
So you can say it looks bad, whatever. But my thing is, we are going to need that money. We're going to be out of it. Either we're going to take it out of departments, or we're going to pray for an override and make it happen. So when I say we put it, I'm just saying where the control lies for those funds. I think there's
The rating agencies don't mind you taking, I mean, the purpose obviously of the stabilization fund is to stabilize, but again, it's meant for cyclical problems with operations that are going to correct itself. You know, ours is systemic as opposed to cyclical. And they do not look kindly on taking money out of a stabilization fund with no mechanism to put it back in. And that's wherein the problem lies. The taking out isn't the problem. The plan to replenish it is.
So that's what we got.
Amy?
Can I just?
You want to come up? It's hard to hear you.
Just a few comments. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat back there. I'm just concerned if you do a regular override and the override doesn't pass it, what's your plan to cover Pickens? This expense is here, and
it's probably here for a long time, and I'm just getting very concerned that, I get your point. To me, this is a big problem that we really need to take care of, and if we have one-time money that we can fund 2 years, I think it's the responsible thing to do, and it's the wise thing to do. If we fund $1 million, $500,000, somewhere in between, there was talk the night Rick Neely was here that we have a ban outstanding of $250,000 right now for fiscal 13. Rather than roll that into long-term debt, maybe we could use some of the million to pay that down so we don't have to incur more long-term debt. And I also just want to make clear, there's questions about whether the legislation will pass that. And I know that is, an unknown, but this recommendation came highly from the DOR that this would be a really good idea to do, and it was one of 3 recommendations presented to a group of us that included, 4 or 5 of us, that we discussed at length. I mean, we put a lot of thought into this. I just am afraid if you roll it into a regular override and that regular override doesn't pass, that then we've got no plan. And the in and out of the stabilization fund, the general stabilization fund, we've talked about that numerous times, that's really, you're better off not to put it in there if you're going to pull it out the next year. So those are my concerns with this. I just think we're never going to have probably this amount of free cash again anytime soon. I think that we need to use what we have wisely, and I think this is a top priority.
I guess if I could just chime in, whether we do it with the way the DOR suggested with the home petition, or whether we do it as a special purpose stabilization, is really, it still hinges on an override vote. I guess either way, one way you're saying that override vote is $500,000 and it's $500,000. So the only practical difference between the two, outside of the fact that it's going to take 1 more year, is one is variable in terms of what it does. Maybe more palatable to the voters, I don't know, saying that if we don't need it in a year, we won't, we won't take it from you. The other way is saying it's going to be $100,000 every single year for the next, we don't know how many years, and it won't vary, because we can't reduce it and bring it back up again. That's not available to us. All we can do is $500,000. So I guess that's the risk, that the voters are going to look at $500,000 every year and say no, and that the home rule petition route of saying, well, it can be a little less in a year, might be more palatable. That's the real risk, I think. Otherwise, it's an override vote either way.
Okay, I just have one other point. I also want to say, so it's out there in public, that in the event that we're not incurring these expenses anymore, whatever's left in that fund, as well as any interest that's earned would be in that fund, would go back as a reduction, go back on the tax recap to reduce the taxes of that year. So this, if we build up a fund and it goes back where we don't need it all, it does go back to the taxpayers as a reduction in a future year.
Darnell?
Well, 2 things. One thing is, an override vote target for Pickens is going to be an override vote target for Pickens. So it's going to have to go in front of the voters regardless. So if the voters say no to that, we got a problem anyway. Okay, so as far as, and the plan that, so either way, it's going to be a plan. The plan that I'm asking for and I'm trying to advocate it, you sell it to the voter out there in Milton is like, listen, it's going to be $500,000 a year until this is no longer our obligation. That's what this is going to be. But in the interim, when we don't have to spend $500,000, we only have to spend $300,000, $200,000, whatever it is, we're going to use the rest of that money as a vehicle to reduce our obligations that we've already occurred in this Pickens. So, in the situation. So we're going to do something to attack that $250,000 every year that we're ending up paying, whether this thing passes or not.
We could do the same thing also though with,
Well, let's-
with either form, we could do the same thing.
The only reason and thing I don't like about the home rule petition is that we're gonna be at the mercy of the legislation and putting ourselves in that situation when we don't have to.
I think it has a lot of support.
I mean, but we don't have to. I mean, we don't have to wait an extra year to try to get to the funding, or extra 2 years based on when they put us on the calendar. We don't have to put ourselves in that situation. So why put ourselves in that situation to get to the same area of there's going to be either a vote and how it's going to be, how that money is going to be used. I mean, there's, it's I don't see any. Actually, that's what I don't see. If we have another situation, which we're going to still get the 500,000, we can still target and we can still do the same thing. So what's the benefit, and that's what I'm missing, the benefit of this home rule petition?
Can I just throw in, I just want to make sure that I understand something. I think the benefit is if we do a regular operational override, we're stuck at 500,000 a year. Where if we do this one, it's whatever the medical costs are, up to 500. So if it's 250, then the override that year is 250 instead of a fixed 500.
That may be more appealing, that may be more appealing to the voters.
Right. I just think that's a difference between what you're suggesting and what you're suggesting. I just want to be clear.
That's correct.
Okay. So a fixed 500 override versus a maximum of 500, 250 up to a max of 500.
Right.
Okay. So it could be less.
The thing that to me, you're saying like, okay, we're still stuck with $250,000 a year debt service that's not being addressed in that home rule petition.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. It could work the same way. You could use those funds for debt service as well.
So again, we don't.
But then you'd probably always be at
500,000, so therefore, we don't need the home rule petition. We bring the control back home, and then we just take care of our business in Milton and Milton. And not have to worry about going out to some third party to ask permission to do what we can do ourselves anyway. And it doesn't guarantee us a vote yes anyway by doing it. And if they, as long as we're paying the bills, I think DOR and everybody else will be happy.
The special purpose stabilization fund route will work as long as the voters vote the override. If they don't, then
they may be more likely to vote a variable override than a fixed 500.
It might be.
We don't know.
But if the reality is it's going to be 500, it's going to be 500. If you need to sell them on debt reduction, it's going to be 500. So if you're selling on variable, then you're selling, you're not really, you know what I'm saying? You're trying, it's not really.
I mean, it's some $60 a year on the average price house in Milton.
Rob?
Whether it's the home rule petition or just a straight override vote, on the chance that you're still on an override vote and it may pass, would you still suggest taking the full $1 million and having 2 years covered in case it goes in April of 14 and doesn't pass? And if that happens then, and if it does pass, you could just get a vote out of town meeting to get the money back out into the general fund?
Well, if you didn't go the home rule petition route, I guess theoretically then you could say, okay, well, we just have to worry about 14 because we're basically in the same situation. It's going out on the ballot, and we know it's going out on the ballot in FY14 for 15, as opposed to going out on the ballot in FY15 for 16. So I guess theoretically you can. I guess what you have to ask yourself is, if it doesn't pass, do you want at least to know that there's at least one more year worth of cash set aside? I know that's the only practical difference you're really talking about.
To me, it's still there. I mean, it's still.
Well, if you put it in stabilization.
If you put it in stabilization, it's still there. So it's not like that cash goes anywhere.
Right.
So that's the only thing.
I would just put it in special. Put it in a special purpose stabilization. Put in a pick and stabilization, and then. If you don't need it, either way, it takes a 2/3 vote to get it out. We can get it out, and it's back as available.
I just want to have the funds be more available as opposed to less available at that point, and that's my biggest thing for 15.
I'm not sure, Donna, how they would be more available in either fund.
Because we can, as if we were gonna do, if we're gonna take the 800,000 out this year, same thing.
We're not taking it out.
We're not taking it
It's a
out,
wash.
we're not.
Right.
But if we were, and that's why we put it there, in the case that we had to, we just wrote that as one of our articles to town meeting. And that's how we would take it out next year, if we needed it. So, I mean, that's why I say it's more available to us as opposed to, okay, we're still sitting on the second year of waiting for something to go through the legislation and we don't have a control of timing on.
Okay.
We might need the money. That's what it is. That's why I'm saying.
Again, I guess we've got two questions to ask, and we can get the answers, but the first one is there any reason, talking to town council, is there any reason not to use a special purpose as opposed to, are we all correct in our thinking that we'll accomplish the same thing? But number two is that question, the answer to that question is yes. Can the warrant committee, through recommendation, change that warrant article to and I don't know the answer to that one. You know, would that be too far different than the article itself? And the article was written fairly broadly.
So it's the scope, yeah, I mean, it's called the scope of the article. It's just basically, I don't know, the scope is $500,000 to cover the cost of, the medical costs of Dickens.
Well, the article doesn't list the
amount.
List a dollar amount. I don't have it in front of me right now. I don't know what it says. I mean, I assume it says to see what some
will appropriate, whatever. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, you don't have the article there.
I do. Do you want it?
Yeah.
I just want to point out too, to Donnell's point about being able to reclassify money. The only reason we can do it this way is because we have enough free cash to do that. We don't know what we're going to get back for free cash next year. It could be negative.
I mean,
so we may not have the ability to do that wash as we do this year.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the wash. I'm talking about if we didn't have the wash.
Yeah.
All we would have did is put an article line in there to take that money out, to use it.
You can't, I'll ask town council, but my quick reading is to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the general court.
Okay.
You can't change that by recommendation. You know, it would have to be a different article.
Do you have it, Tom? Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
This plan was already given to this idea too.
Yeah, I know. I don't think DOR is going to care as long as it's not debt, but you can't change this article the way it's written, because it's written as a home rule petition article. So it would take a new article, which would mean open and closing the warrant to get a new article in, which...
In the meantime, we have $1 million to appropriate. To get a level dollar budget.
Correct. So, I can ask the question, but what it would require at this point would be a new warrant article, I believe, which would mean opening and closing the warrant one more time, put the article in, having warrant committee voted, and then on this one, just, vote no, or recommend no, is what it would take.
Okay, Joyce?
Tom, I would be interested in finding out why the Department of Revenue you used the term dismissed when you made a similar recommendation. I don't know if there was something that we don't know, or that they know, or they didn't give a no, or just dismissed it. That concerns me, and I would like to know what they saw in that
I don't remember the exact, I remember talking about it, we talked about it, my recollection was they say, yeah, you could do it that way, but, and then the but was, we think this is a better way. But I don't remember what their thought process was as to why they thought this was a better way.
I don't remember either. It wasn't as simple as that way. I forget the reason that this was the preferable method, but I wish Rick was here too.
Yeah, I mean, if you go, well, the only other practical difference, if you go through, then the select special special purpose fund. If you go the stabilization, it still requires a 2/3 vote every year to get it out of the stabilization fund to be available for, so you would have to appropriate every year, the 500,000.
The reason I asked the question is, you used the term, they dismissed it several times, which means that's almost worse than a no. I mean, to me, that says they have...
Dismissed in the sense that they seem to prefer this method.
Okay.
Why they did, I don't really know, but, and again, the practical differences in the home rule petition, we would have control of the special purpose fund. It's not a stabilization fund. In the override special purpose stabilization fund, it is a stabilization fund. It still would have to be appropriated every year and require a 2/3 vote. Would town meeting ever withhold the 2/3 vote? I doubt it. But
I think that was
It-
probably the main reason, and the fact that if there is a balance, this way the interest stays with it. I think that was the other big reason why we felt it was beneficial, was that it does go back to reduce the rate at a later date in the event that there's a surplus.
yeah, but that
in
doesn't,
that
same thing though,
account.
doesn't stabilization funds, don't they feel this? Doesn't our capital stabilization, I think it does.
I thought it just stayed there
No,
forever.
special override, it goes away. If you have special override, it goes to a certain period of time, which this one is point uncertain, and then just vote it. Ended. That service is no longer needed. Done. I mean,
Right, but I believe our capital stabilization fund accrues interest and stays within the fund. And would have to be appropriated by town meeting to use it.
Same thing. So it's like,
As
it's not-
with this, you could still accumulate the interest,
Right.
just the same as any other stabilization fund. So really, that wouldn't be a practical difference either. The only practical difference is you'd need the 2/3 vote from town meeting to get it out. Yeah, but you could draw down the whole thing plus the accrued interest if you wanted to.
I'd like to recognize Glenn Habitat.
Just a question. I think part of the issue is whether you use a special purpose stabilization fund or not, you're still going to need a home rule petition. Because under Proposition 2.5, there are only two kinds of overrides. There's a debt exclusion override, which this is, and there's a regular operating override, which would add $500,000 to the tax rate forever.
Right.
This isn't a forever.
What
This
is-
is until at some point, and you'd have to have some leeway to be able to cut it off at the point when it's not necessary anymore. I think you're going to need.
Well, my understanding on the legislation, because special purpose stabilization funds changed, I'm not sure how many years ago. First of all, to allow you to set a special purpose stabilization fund, anything you want under the sun, pretty much. And that it could be funded with an override vote. So you can have.
Terminal length?
Well, I guess if you could set up for pretty much anything, then it's akin to, I mean, it really is an operating override. It's just that it's an operating override only for this one special purpose, just to pay these medical expenses. And there is an end. There is absolutely an end.
For all.
I'd just like to remind everybody that this article is an appropriation for $1 million. This is not an override article that we're appropriating.
Right.
So we're not voting on an override right now, we're just voting on an appropriation to this particular article. Carolyn? I'm sorry? Ted, go ahead.
I think there's some advantage in having two bites at the apple with the taxpayer, once in 2014, and then perhaps if that doesn't fly as part of an override for more general operational purposes as well, then you can come back at them in 2015, and meanwhile you funded 2 years. But you won't have the ability to go for the 2014 vote if you put it through the home rule petition.
Correct.
If I
would guess you would. I don't think you'd get the home rule petition back in time to get it back. You might, but there's no guarantee of that.
But if we do have an operational override in 2015, 414,
415, yeah.
415, and then you come back at the taxpayer saying, oh, and by the way, we forgot, we need another $500,000 for this situation. Then if that's not passed, then there's a problem. So I kind of like the idea of having two bites at it with the taxpayer.
You know, using Darnell's theory.
Right, and we can still, I mean...
Yeah, I guess like I said, the private part right now is yeah, we would have to open the warrant again and close the warrant again.
But right now, we're voting $1 million appropriation. That's what's on the table. Not changing a recommendation or anything.
Right, but I guess one affects the other, though, I guess necessarily, that's the problem.
If we want to get to a $0 budget, we need to appropriate
We'll just move
those
everything in,
dollars. We need to park it somewhere.
yeah, park it in the,
Let's move to a vote.
the revolving.
Okay, any other questions? All right, can we go to a vote, please? All in favor of the motion on the table? Opposed? You all set, Tricia?
I'm sorry, Ms. George and Fred, did you both vote in favor?
In favor?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you,
One
Amy.
thing, could
Sure, I got that from.
can y'all get back to us on,
I will get back to you on whether, on the other article, whether we do have the availability of doing it some.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we do, but,
You joining us, Bill?
yeah, just in case you want to talk about East Milton, too. We are prepared to talk about it.
Well, the only thing with East Milton, do we need Emily, the planning board? I'm not
No.
sure. Okay. All right, I'll take a motion to put the East Milton Square study on the table. You want the motion with appropriation?
I make, with an appropriation?
300,000. And then we'll vote what we want to appropriate.
I mean, personally, I make a motion to appropriate $0 to the East Milton Design Review Study.
Okay.
Second.
Discussion. I think we should share with the people at home some of our feelings, some of our opinions. Would anybody like to share their opinion on this article?
I made the motion,
Carolyn?
so, I think that we're in a financially strapped situation right now, and personally, I think the $300,000 does not solve the issues. I know we've seen the plans, and to me, it does not feel like it really solves the issues for the amount of money that it's costing, and I appreciate the fact that there's $1 million grant out there, but at the end of the day, I think it's fiscally irresponsible to appropriate money just so that we don't lose this $1 million grant. And that's how I personally feel on the issue.
Cheryl?
I'll add to what Carolyn had to say. I feel as if the plan, the scope of the services and the scope of the construction is unclear to me. $300,000 for design services for $1 million of construction would be excessive. It's unclear whether the scope would go beyond the plan that we've received, which is a version of the hybrid plan that was done by the consultant, Howard Stein Hudson, but it's not a direct outcome of that study. I've reread that study, and there are certain recommendations that come prior to implementing this parking plan that I think haven't been clearly identified as what would be covered in the scope of the services. And one last thing is, I think it's putting implementation of one piece of improvement to the square that I think with the master plan could hopefully look at other improvements to East Milton Square, and then a comprehensive implementation could be sought.
Okay, other discussion? Comments?
Can we speak to?
Sure.
First, Bill, why don't you go over, and because I think there's, I think at least some of the members of the warrant committee were under the impression that this was not vetted out very well. Could you go over the process that's been going on for the past several years in terms of the various committees that have been established and how the study was brought together and you know, who the study committee was, you know, between the business community, the residents, and so the warrant committee understands that process first. I think secondly, then I think you could talk about the scope of services and the.
Since the state planned to put in the Southeast Expressway, there have been studies. Every decade brings its own. There was one in the 50s, there was another in the 60s, there was 70s, there were 80s, they had the 90s. We did ours. In the one that just was completed 2 years ago, it cost $150,000. We had $150,000 from a grant from Congressman Lynch to go and do the East Milton Square parking and access study. The study was done in the open. Every one of our meetings was televised. We had a Business and Citizen Advisory Committee. There were 15 members chosen from all over town. They met for 18 months on coming up with a plan. The plan isn't just about a parking lot. It isn't taking and spending $1.3 million to come up with 32 parking spaces. That's not the plan. The plan itself is a combination of curbside management, wayfinding, simple pedestrian improvements, circulation changes, improve the pedestrian environment, calm the traffic, and create a moderate new number of parking spaces in the area. When you take in, you're getting new sidewalks, you're getting crosswalks that are aligned for safety, for sighting, for pedestrian usage. You're getting signs for streets, parking, traffic markings. You're getting signals that'll be coordinated. You'll have crosswalk buttons that actually talk to one another. They don't right now. In the deck area, you'll get a retooled area that provides 32 spaces as conceived in the plan, the Wiser plan as it is right now. In the deck area, you'll get a destination point. It's not just for parking. You'll get a green space that's reinvigorated for better user friendliness. The entire area will wind up having to have bicycle lanes because it's federal law. When you use federal money, you have to provide for pedestrian and bicycle with the cars. It's not just creating 32 parking spaces. It's anything but. It's taking and aligning the crosswalks so that you can go from the post office, you can go to the corner of Adams Street and Granite Ave. It's a straight shot going through. It's changing the lines that are out there now. It's taking the crosswalk that's in the mid-block and moving it up to the corner where it's supposed to be. It's making everything so that one crosswalk connects to the next crosswalk. It's not, we walk and then we have to walk 50 yards up to get to the next one. It's coordinated lights, it's coordinated crosswalks. I don't see that, we just lost $834,000, $860,000 that we lost. And I don't see that we need to lose the other million because we don't want to take and put something into this.
Plus, the other million probably gets us a MassWorks grant as well, or it gets us at least a good shot at a MassWorks grant.
What you have that I handed out is what I had in the MassWorks grant. And it isn't like we're sitting here waiting for you to pay for it. We've looked in other places too. We've gone back to the congressional offices, looking for more federal money, just isn't happening. Trying to go back after some of the other money, not very likely. They've already spent it. We tried to put it in through MassWorks, we did not get it this year. This is money that we didn't use it and we lost it the first time. And if they can do it once, they will do it again. There is billions of dollars sitting out there in projects that haven't taken off. This is one that has been studied and studied and studied. 15 people took a year and a half and came up with a plan. It came up with ideas for the area. Was it 100% consensus? No. But was it the majority? Yes, it was. It was a combination of citizens, the business owners, the business users down there. We had people who were bicycle and pedestrian fanatics. We had people who lived right in the square. This is the best we came up with, and now to lose it at the last stage is not, probably won't be handled too well.
Any discussion? Charles?
The $300,000 that you've requested would go towards what services in particular relative to this?
Design, engineering, and contingency.
So design, engineering, and construction contingency, or
Yes.
design contingency?
Construction contingencies.
What amount of the 300 would be construction contingency?
I can't give you that answer right now. This is the number that I was told that the project would cost from beginning to end.
So what happens if $1 million isn't sufficient to build the improvements on the deck, plus curb, the signalization, bike lanes,
I think what Bill is saying...
sidewalks and so forth?
I think what Bill is saying is the whole project, including design and construction, is estimated to be 1.3.
I guess because this is my...
So the 300,000 really isn't design, the 300,000 is design plus shortfall of construction.
I guess my concern is still, because I deal with these kinds of contracts in my professional life, is that it's too vague. It's, normally you would have a plan, a schematic plan, and a cost estimate associated with it. And the cost estimate would identify the construction costs highlighted, signalization improvements would be this, landscape improvements would be this, and get you to a
that is exactly
total.
what we would have done with the other money that we had there. We would have hired that particular individual to write that invitation for bids. We would have had somebody who would have taken and done phase 2. As it is, we have to find somebody to write phase 2 right now and not pay them, or we have to do it in-house, and in-house is probably how we're going to have to create it.
When I reread a couple of times, since you were in before, the study that was done by Howard Stein Hudson, they strongly suggested that there's adequate number of parking spaces in East Milton Square, but that was a better management of those parking spaces needed to occur. And then they highly recommended meters, because it would help with turnover of parking spaces, which is how you manage how long people are parked there. They recommended improvements to the crosswalks and pedestrian ways and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, in further out phases, they suggested building additional parking spaces. And it seems to me what we've been presented with is a plan that emphasizes the parking space and the park part of it and not the other things. And so it's not clear to me what percentage of the construction budget would go for each one. It's very expensive to build over a highway, and it's far less expensive to build the crosswalks. But signalization itself can be quite expensive because you have to do a lot of controls and wiring and so forth. So it's not clear to me that you can accomplish what you'd like to accomplish within the design and construction without having more analysis. So if you came and said, we'd like to do more analysis to identify which parts of this plan we can implement and which parts we may not be able to implement. And then you had a phase 2, which came back and said, we want to go forward with this particular plan. That would be more comfortable to me.
Other comments? George?
As a resident of both East Milton for quite a few years and then on the other side, Pleasant Street, and I travel through that part of East Milton daily. And there's a lot of the things in here I really do agree with. I think it's nice that you can have it simple pedestrian improvements. I think that's really good to get back and forth to that library, and you can accomplish that. Improvement on the pedestrian environment, it mentions here calm traffic, provides a moderate amount of new parking. Now, my neighbors and the people that I've talked to, they always felt that it was going to be more about parking, have as many spots as they could, so they can go down there, park, and not be going around the block time and time again to try to find a way to park, because there's so few parking spots already. So to say that that's just a small part, I think a lot of people thought that was going to be the big part, a lot more parking. The park that is there now, and I spoke to the people who were surrounding that, I don't want to say who they are because they didn't give me permission to quote them, but they say every time they look over there, they don't see anybody using that park. And it was a beautiful Christmas, and the trees look beautiful, and then you can still do that with, even if it's a garage. You did say, Tom, that, garages are ugly. There's a lot of garages that can really be beautiful with the kind of skin that they put on it. I'm just saying, there's things to get it.
But you're not going to build a garage for $1 million.
Well, I just don't see, to spend the money on the park, we can have more parking spaces. Because nobody just uses it. In the bicycle part, I don't think anybody in the bicycle, well, I can't say that because you've got people that agree with it, but I think the majority of them would say the last thing you want is bicycles in a heavy traveled area. So there's going to be 4 or 5 intersections, and you're going to try to put a bicycle path through it. If anything, a bicycle path, you should bring you away from that area, wherever you're going, so you're not going in the middle of all that traffic.
But that was the federal mandate now.
So you can't have the $1 million that you have a bicycle path?
You look in Boston, that's why you're seeing them all there. I mean, that is where the federal government wants their dollars to go.
Is that you have to have the bicycle path to have that $100 million?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a bicycle path as much as it is.
Making it more bicycle friendly.
Right, it has to be bicycle friendly, but you either have to share one of those lanes or you have to have the small marked out lane for the bicycles. It's part of the federal requirement to use their money.
Well, they can park the bicycles at the park.
They can.
I mean, there's practical, first of all, we had the practical problem with the park, that it was dedicated as a park. There was very real concern that you could not put parking on that entire deck without naming replacement open space. And we were unable to get anybody, any place, to commit to say, yes, absolutely, you can put parking there, and it's not a park. All we ever got from the feds is, we'll decide whether it's a park, not you. That's the only thing we got out of them. And we weren't willing to take that risk of going down the road with a plan that was going to be turned upside down. We think this gets us a more usable park because it flattens it out. Right now, there's no walking space. It's all planters in there. I mean, there's a couple of trails through it. It's not conducive to people really going and using it. To put a small gazebo in there and to flatten it out so that it's totally green. There'll be more green there now in the new plan than there is right now. And there'll be some parking spaces. We're
looking to enhance the green space. We're not looking to take it away. We looked at taking it away and making the whole thing parking. And then we bump up against a park is a park, or a green space could be a park, or it is a park. And rather than take on the issue, we'll leave the green space there. and we've taken what is road and we've formed parking area out of it. So we're retaining the green space, we're making it a destination point that when you come to it, it's not just about finding a parking space, it's a gathering space. We're going to attempt to reuse the trees that are in there, reuse some of the planters that are in there, take out what's in the middle so that you have a flattened out area that it actually can be used by more people than just can fit on the sidewalk. We're trying to enhance the green space, enhance the parking area so that it becomes a destination point. We want to be able to use it again for Christmas, but at the same time, put more cars in there. It's not all about the parking as much as it is helping with some of the traffic circulation down in the area. If you're going slower going around it, you may just see that parking space that you're looking for further away. If the parking's all in the middle, you might not think as much about having to walk that extra half a block. When they looked at their numbers in the study and said, we have parking spaces, well, some of them are 2 and 3 blocks up. Well, for some of us, that's not a bad walk. For some of us, you're going to walk in 2 blocks. I don't want to do that right now. Everybody wants to park in front of the store they want to go to. We just don't have that many stores right now. We just don't have that many parking spaces. So it's get out of the car and walk. I agree with that, but here it is that you're taking and creating a centralized focal point that you can put some of that parking. It's a destination point as much as it is a parking lot. If you get there, you have to walk. Well, if I just walked to the right, maybe when I get back to the car, I walk to the left. I park there to go to the post office. Well, if I could walk that street, why can't I walk that street and go back into the business district? Or why can't I take and walk the half a block over to the fruit center versus having to drive down?
Kevin?
Just to add a few comments. I live in East Milton Square, and I go through that park 4 or 5 times a week during the summer, biking through it. In my small opinion, it's never going to be a destination place because all you do is hear traffic and smell exhaust. Okay? No one's going to walk their kids around in it. It's not an environment that you're going to stick around because it's noisy.
Correct.
And it smells of car exhaust. Weekdays, weekends. I think, my small opinion, no one's going to go there to hang out and see a band play. I mean, I think you're being
wouldn't do that,
reasonable.
but to meet somebody at a particular spot, it's central.
I think you're being astonishingly naive that people are going to meet there to go somewhere else. I think people think of it as I'll park there to get somewhere, but I'm not going to meet to go anywhere in that park and have a picnic there.
I wouldn't expect that either.
Well, that's kind of what it sounds like, though, okay? I mean, I'd much rather go to the gazebo right up here and have a picnic than over the Southeast Expressway.
I guess, other than, and clearly, huge difference in size, but clearly in terms of what it's built over and the amount of congestion, the amount of traffic, is that the Greenway, over the tunnel in Boston is the same kind of park.
Yeah, no one goes there. They go to get somewhere else.
I beg to differ. I mean, have you been in there on a beautiful summer day?
I'm right on Federal Street. I'm there all the time. I mean, the park right in front of Station. I mean, it's...
As you get down by the Boston Harbor Hotel and around there? I mean, I've been through there too. I see lots of people using it. I see lots of people using Post Office Square, that park over Post Office Square.
There's not a highway breathing fumes up through
the park. No, it's a parking garage.
Right, but that is properly vented 4 stories above the park. Okay. Another follow-up question. Has it been explored to lease this or sell this to a private entity to build a parking garage? If not, why not?
Well, first of all, we don't think we can build a parking garage. Technically, the ownership, I believe, of that is not the town's, right?
Is not owned by the town, it's owned by Mass Highway under a care and custody to the town.
So, I mean,
We
there's a
would have to
hotel over
give it-
Mass Pike, why can't we put a building over the Southeast Expressway?
I actually know there is a reason, I just don't have it on the tip of my tongue. And it wouldn't be ours, it would be over Mass Highway, and it would come back to Federal Highway.
But it would still suit the needs that we would outline, right?
I do believe they would have to rebuild that area. The area was built for cars.
Right, but it
So
wouldn't
we
be
wouldn't
a-
have to rebuild it, to go back to answer your question, we wouldn't have to go back and redo the engineering of the area because it was planned to have cars
To carry
on
that
top
kind
of
of
it. So we're set with that one. To go back and change it, to take and put a building on top of it, now you're changing.
Agreed, but it wouldn't be us paying for it, it would be the private entity paying for that.
It would be, but it also is it'll go back to the state, it'll go back to the feds, and there are several of those that have been proposed in Boston, and they have not yet been built. There are 2 air right projects in the city of Boston now, and they've been there over 10 years, and they're nowhere.
Cheryl?
Oh, the reason they're nowhere is the state has been asking quite a lot of money in rent for the land lease on those, and it's costly to build over it, so the numbers haven't been made to work. But
And even
if,
less so in Milton. I mean, how much are you gonna have to charge for parking spaces to build, unless you're gonna build a 50-story parking garage, you're not gonna get enough parking spaces in there to make it pay for itself.
I actually don't necessarily know that a parking garage over it would be great, but I think I suggested at our last meeting, and I've suggested at other times, that actually knitting the 2 sides of town together across the highway is a much better plan than building a parking lot. It would take some investigation with the state in order to see what would be possible. You wouldn't build a high-rise like you have in downtown over the turnpike, no doubt, and the higher you build, the more costly it is to build over the highway. So it's a matter of the loads that you're transferring down and over the highway. But the other thing, the other point I wanted to make was that, looking at that study, one of the things that was addressed was in speaking to the pedestrian environment and not wanting to cross if you park over on one side of the highway to the other, has to do with the exit ramp off of the highway coming right through. And the study suggested, talking with the state, about redirecting that exit ramp in some capacity. To me, that would be a far better improvement, is to get some of the traffic that makes the pedestrian environment very difficult to park on one side or another. And whether this appropriation goes forward or not, I would still highly encourage that effort, that conversation with the state to occur.
Yeah, I think that there was interest in that. Well, there were 2 things out of this. One was to try and get the state to do something to, on the Granite Avenue exit off the expressway, it only goes in one direction. It goes towards Dorchester. And there's a huge amount of traffic that comes off of there to try and get to State Street South, to let them go down one more exit and approach State Street South from Granite Avenue up Squantum Street, as opposed to going through the square. And that's great, but it's kind of out of our control. I mean, we can suggest it, we can ask for it, but ultimately it's going to be the state. I'm not sure about where you could redirect, or I don't think the state would ever allow us to close off the...
The issues are how close the different exits are to each other. It does need to go back to the UPWP, which is the Unified Program Work Plan, that is kept by the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. CTPS, which is the Central Transportation Planning Staff, would then they keep the Unified Program Work Plan, and it would have to go in and go through all of the state agencies, through the subregions for the Regional Planning Agency. It's a minimum of a 5-year study to get to that point, and then you have to ask the feds, and then it's,
Well-
you start the process again.
It would be wonderful if
I'm
East
not
Milton
sure.
Square wasn't a cut-through.
We knew that.
It would be wonderful.
It
Right.
wasn't something you could do in 2 years. We know that, which is why it's down there. If you look where it is, it's under long-term. And that long-term, I believe it says greater than 24 months, but we knew that it was greater than 60 months to get to that point.
But the problems in East Milton Square have been decades-long, and in large part due to the traffic that's coming from the highway and other places, and it's not going to get resolved with this plan. It's only going to get resolved by taking it and addressing the real problem.
And I think we have intentions of doing that, but...
But I think this was also the local issue, this wasn't the greater regional issue. Those highway issues are regional issues. This was to address the local issue.
But you're not going to address the safety of pedestrian crossing from one side of from East Milton side to the other side.
We already
You're saying
have to a
what?
degree. We already have to a degree just by closing Adams Street off. You can talk to anybody that goes through East Milton Square, and it's helped tremendously get from the post office across, because now you've got one less street to
But
have to cross.
not crossing from the parking that's on, I'm forgetting the name of the street, the Granite Avenue. If you park and then you push the light to wait by Brugger's Bagel to cross and hold tight to any kid's hands because the cars are flying through there.
Well, the one thing I want to do is, and we're still trying to get to that point, is to get rid of the slip lane, which will cut. That's the biggest problem with, and that crosswalk's in a lousy place anyways. But the biggest problem is people coming out of the slip lane going from Adams Street across onto Granite Ave, and they're looking this way when people are crossing the crosswalk, and there's near misses, several times a day.
So which plan would be implemented, the one with that or without?
The selectmen voted to Plan A, which eliminated the slip line.
And does that need approval from the state as well, that plan?
We would send both of them to, when we did our engineering, we would ask the engineer to take and look at the turning radii required for going around the green space. The way that our engineers have looked at it with their software, with their computers, is we need the slip lane. But when we go out for the bigger picture on the construction part of it, we will have whoever that traffic engineer is look and see what it will take to, keep it, lose it, have to change the configuration of the radii coming around in front of Boulevard Street.
So
That's part of the
the
engineering.
Howard Stein Hudson are
Design.
their traffic engineers, so they are recommending that the slip lane remain.
That wasn't even in their plan. In their plan, it shows leaving
The slip line.
the slip lane there.
Right.
In the Weiser plan, which shows Howard Stein Hudson did one plan that one of the Business and Citizen Advisory Committee members did for his thesis. He came up with a plan that made the whole thing parking. We came back and we ran into the issue of what is a park, what is green space. We said, look, we'll do half and half. We'll leave the green space alone, we'll put in parking. The Chamber of Commerce came in, they had an architect take a look at it, and he flipped it, and he went, green space where the green space is, parking lot where the roadway was. That's the Weiser plan. The Weiser plan comes in and it goes A and B. A takes away the slip lane. B puts the slip lane in, or leaves it in. When the town's engineers took and looked at the Weiser plan, we kept looking at it saying that we could not make it, the turning radii of certain trucks cannot take and make it around Boulevard Street. So we said, leave the slip lane in there until we have a traffic engineer look at that particular area.
Joyce?
Originally, I was thinking that the 300,000 was really for design and that the million was for construction and the completion, but you're saying that it's kind of all 1,300,000 is for everything and it will be complete at that point. I really wanted to know then, because I was under the assumption that design was what the town would be kicking in. So I know if you, I don't know, I don't know so much about it that well, let me ask the question. What is the town putting their money up for? I mean, what really would the town get out of this in terms of...
Finishing the project.
Well, I mean, in terms of, can you point to where the town's money is going and where it comes into play if it's not in the design? I mean...
It's design, it's engineering, and it's contingency money for the difference between the design engineering cost and the construction cost. I have $1 million that I can spend for construction. If I choose to use the $1 million for anything but construction, I have a 6-month window on going back to the feds to ask permission to use it. And it's a much harder process than if I fund that first part.
We're not moving enough?
You got a what?
We were too still. See, I have that every day in the office, every 10 minutes. It's everything construction plus to get to the end. Does that answer your question? Or if that doesn't, which part? I don't see
No,
that's off.
there's a good possibility we can't use a MassWorks grant for the plan and design.
You can't use it for design engineering, but you
can
could use it for construction.
Well, I guess for me, when I have to think of all of the other considerations that we have to make in terms of all of the responsibilities that we have, it just doesn't seem as, excuse me, as concrete as everyone else's budgets that they put before us, or it just seems as though we could use it here, maybe we can do that, maybe it would be this. It just doesn't seem as concrete or as urgent. I know that you would lose the $1 million, but well...
You're not getting it back if you lose this one.
Okay, Carolyn, and Ted?
Jane, I just have a quick question. If we were to vote on $0 appropriation now, once we then go through our budgets, can we then reopen up this article, and if, say, there was funds remaining?
I mean, if there are funds.
So if we say 0 vote now, there is opportunity to reopen this article if we choose to.
We can vote about it, isn't that correct, Tom? And at another meeting.
You can always reopen any.
At a posted meeting, we can we can do that. Wait a minute, Ted?
Yeah, I guess a lot of people have a problem with the idea that you can tell us that it's only going to be $1,300,000 to get to the end of the project, but you don't know what portion of that is going to be the design and engineering piece. So, I mean, if the design and engineering piece was only $100,000, then one would think, hey, this is a pretty nice ratio between design cost and construction cost, and it would be a lot more palatable. But I mean, is there any clue you can give us there what that construction contingency might be? Because perhaps that would be better bonded.
Or what the design might cost. I mean, Cheryl seems to think that design 100 to 150 grand would be somewhat reasonable on $1 million, or we're talking, in that case, $1.2 million construction project. But we haven't gone out for RFP for it, so, you know, we don't know what it's gonna come in at, but what's a reasonable number? And I'm not an architect, I'm not a planner, I have no idea.
Rob?
To follow up on Carolyn's question, for all of this one-time money, we put it to use, anything that's remaining of the one-time money, are we going to vote to put into a stabilization fund? Was that the plan?
It'll be a vote of the committee.
Yeah, but we'd have to
It's
do
an
something.
option.
It wouldn't go, it still wouldn't go into, our plan is not to have it go into operating budgets, because that's recurring.
Correct. Cheryl?
We've looked at all of the one-time requests, and there are many, and there are more requests than we have funds for. That's why we've been sort of hammering on this every time we've talked about it, really, tried to get more concrete, like Joyce said, because all the other requests, we do the same hammering, and we kind of get the sense that we understand that there's a real urgent need. And I think what we can't come to grips with is the urgent need for $300,000. So it seems to me that the construction contingency ought to come out of the construction budget, so that when you budget the construction, you build in the construction contingency. You might build in, the earlier you are in the process, the larger your contingency is, because your unknowns are great. This is highly unknown here, because I can't get my handle around, I can't get my arms around the scope. So I don't know if $1 million is good or not, so I don't know if 300 is good or
We had every
not.
intention of taking this and making this a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We had every intention of taking and putting that design engineering into a second scope. And we had the money to develop that scope. When the president took that away, now it changed everything to the point that now we know we have $1 million for construction, and that's it. You can't do anything else with the money if you want to use it now. Otherwise, you've got this 6-month delay going to the feds, and it doesn't mean that they'll let you necessarily use it, because it was not put there for design engineering. You have to ask for it.
Understood.
Can I ask a question? Maybe it's,
Well, you can ask another question.
maybe it's a way to resolve this thing. Is if we were to pare it down to, say, $150,000, and all we're looking for is money for the design, we'll worry about the rest of the construction later. Would we still be able to get it? I mean, if we had 150, most likely that's going to cover our design costs. Would we be able to get it? Well, I guess we've already got a project number on the tip, but would we get the whole thing? I mean, it may mean if we don't get another grant, we're back in October saying we need another 150 more.
I would rather have that, because I'd rather know better what the scope is. I'd rather know better what $1 million will buy, because I look at this
Can you
plan
live with
and
that
I'm
then?
not sure what $1 million buys in this plan.
So if Bill can live with that, I can live with that, if you can live with that.
We have to discuss ourselves, I think, whether we think of all the needs, whether we have 150, but I'd much rather advocate for 150 than for 300.
That way we can get you the numbers that you're looking for. I mean...
Right, you can't get the numbers you're saying because you don't have the funds to hire someone to get the numbers.
Right.
Understood. I'm not sure you need 150 to get that piece of it, but...
We don't, but we want to also start moving the
Start
project
moving
forward, too.
forward.
And if we can't start the design phase, then...
But would you consider doing it such that you hired someone to do an estimate of the plan that you'd like to proceed with, and then you came back in the fall and you said, here's what we know we can do for $1 million, and here's what we need to execute that plan? Because you're going to have to go out to advertise for that design services.
Benchmarks, and we want to...
25, 75. We have to go through the public process through Mass Highway.
And we need the design. there.
But don't you have to do a preliminary design or a design studies phase where you do a cost estimate and then you go out for a
Then it has
separate
to go back out,
contract?
and we have to go out to the 25%. By the time you get to 25%, you're pretty much, you're close to it. Yes, and
So
there's a
don't-
whole process
sorry.
that has to go through the district, through the state, out to the feds. Actually, if we fund this part of it, we don't have to go to the feds, we only have to go to the state. So there is a little bit of a time savings. In the overall, when we go to do the whole project, then we have to go back to the feds. But as we do the design and we do engineering right now, we don't have to. Because
So-
if we funded it, it doesn't have to go to federal.
I could see supporting maybe $75,000 to $100,000 that would go towards that first phase of the work, which would identify the scope and identify a cost estimate that you could know what you could build for $1 million. Because then you may find that you need $1.5 million. And how would you come up with the 5, or where would you cut the 5 from the plan?
Well, if we only get the 150, or if we're doing one or two things. Well, the first thing we're doing, and which we would have done anyways, is look for additional grant money via the MassWorks grant, or, which we know we can't use the MassWorks grant for the design phase, but we can use the construction.
And you know you're going to need a better estimate for that as well, for that
Oh, yeah.
grant application.
Yeah, absolutely. But that would be the goal, is to go that route. I think it always was the goal to try and get other grant money. Initially, I guess, we wanted to know that we had a viable project, but I guess the concern right now is just to get it to, it is on the tip, and it is a project. Because then there's no way we can lose the money, so the faster it gets to that point, at least we preserve the $1 million.
So do you feel as if having 75 to 100 to do that preliminary design stage, which would get you the budget estimate, would put you on the path, not risking $1 million?
Do we need the 25%?
No, we have to have more. No, just to put it on the tip, we have to have the design engineering to get to the tip, and then the project has to be shovel-ready. You can make it to they have a universe of projects, and then there is the tip. So it's a completely designed project, goes to the tip. The tip is the Transportation Improvement Plan, and it is what gets approved by the Metropolitan Planning Organization. In order for federal money to be spent by the state, it has to be put on what is called a tip. The tip is revised once or twice a year, and usually it is project-ready money. Because this is a federal earmark, the money is already there. We're not cutting somebody else out to create our project. If you go and try to move the ramp project, you would have to put it in the in the tip, and you would have to remove somebody else to get that project done, or show a huge regional need. This one doesn't need that. Yes, if we have a project that is shovel-ready, we can go to the tip and we can start spending the money.
So I think we want to make sure, and I'd rather know that we have at least that now, so that we can so we know that we saved $1 million, which, again, is enough to do the design phase.
We're moving forward to get to it. Will I know what that number is? I'm a lot closer to knowing what that number is. If I can hire somebody to go and do that start to the design engineering, I'll know how much the rest of the project will cost.
But then we have to, if we have to wait till October to do that, then I think we do jeopardize the project. That's my concern.
Right.
Rick?
Yeah, my question, I was definitely one of the people that were a little reserved last time around, and I do appreciate you coming back. I think you've given some more information, and I, one of my biggest reservations, and I do believe this could be a good start for East Milton, I emphasize start, because obviously we all know that these bus things need to be done. But obviously, what Cheryl said is, we have this much money, and this many people coming asking for it. So I like the idea of possibly voting it down and then re-looking at it. But my question really was, is we did talk the last time when you were here about the possibility of putting this in your capital improvement budget. Is that still an option?
We could, you could bond it. I mean, if you want to approve it for, I mean, we could put the 150 on the, you know, in the capital budget and approve it that way. It just gonna cost more overall, because you're gonna be paying, you know, interest for the next umpteen years on the
20-year bond.
Yeah.
Amy, I wondered if you wanted to comment to that at all, as part of the capital?
We could do that, I'll have to, get this maybe back together again and, whatnot, and resubmit that are, you know, the items that were.
Well, just submit one more thing to be added to that article.
So
that's
how
all.
quickly would that happen?
I'd have to, send an email to the committee members, because I pretty much told them what I thought were done for the week. I mean, I don't think it would be that big of a deal.
What would you expect in time, in terms of
You
timing?
need to give me a couple weeks anyway.
Oh, I'm sure.
Next week's February vacation.
I mean, this wouldn't even, this still hasn't gone through town meeting, so for this, you're even looking to May. But if you could do it in a capital bond quicker than that, that might be a better route.
Yeah, just a follow-up statement to that. I mean, I'm not looking to see this cost a lot more, but, you know, when we look at the available funds, I mean, in my mind, I'm looking at, you know, what's the safety, what's security, what do we really have to do? And as much as I want to see this happen, it's probably further down than some of the other safety and security and just plain old, you have to have it done, items. So that's why, I mean, I don't want to not see it go through, but maybe the option that was said about putting it down and waiting till the end might be the best way to do, but also looking at that at the same time, because then we can use these available funds for other things.
Yeah. Other comments, questions? Okay, so we have a motion on the table to appropriate $0 to this project. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed? Okay, thank you. Tom, can I ask you to stay for a couple of minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Fire space needs study. Are you the right person? I'm not quite clear on this one.
As to what it is, or do we need $25,000?
20,000.
Or whatever it was, yeah. I still don't know at this point. I would say if you wanted to approve it without the 25, I'm sure they'll get a committee together of some kind. If we needed money, I guess if we needed additional money, we could always come back at some point in time. If you wanted to take 20 grand and put it in the reserve fund, then we'll come back to it as a reserve fund transfer if we need it. You could do that.
So who's requesting this, Tom?
It's a selectman article. We're just not certain, once we get this study committee together, are they going to need a consultant or not?
So this Board of Selectmen will be responsible for appointing this
Yes.
committee?
Yes. And the charge is going to be to study all three of the fire stations and the needs to renovate, how it be done. It will also include location and design features of a 21st century fire station.
Ted?
You know, we recognize the need for a study for the fire department. We were certainly hoping that we could put the committee together and that they could identify their
Right, and I'm saying
needs.
that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
So I think we'd be inclined to appropriate $0, but we're very much in favor of the committee.
Like I said, that's the only thing that you might want to consider, taking that same 20 and just dumping it into the reserve fund, only because if we do put this committee together and then they say, okay, well, now we need a consultant, we come back in October where there's no more money to appropriate in October. It's gone and it's already been appropriated, so, unless you have some windfall that we can appropriate from,
Yeah.
the money wouldn't be there.
So we'll put a motion on the table.
I move that we appropriate $0 for the fire space needs study. And register our happiness with the idea of the committee being established.
Kevin, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, the next article for the stabilization fund was actually put in, I think by me, but we don't need it, so I want to retract it, but I don't know how.
The easiest way is, I don't think, I'll double check with town council, but I don't think there's any way to pull an article back once it's, once we've closed the warrant.
Yeah.
I think you just recommend a no vote.
Okay.
That's probably, as a practical matter, that's the easiest way.
Oh, what did I do?
Could I ask you a question also, Gene?
Sure.
The way you had your spreadsheet designed, that, the one you called the 2/9 presentation,
Oh, yeah.
you backed out the 800,000 from the 2.5 million.
2.7,
7
yeah.
million, to come down to 1.8.
Right.
Now, are you gonna take that other 800,000 and appropriate it someplace else?
It's gonna go in operating costs, so that we'll have enough money for operating costs. As I said earlier, Article 29,
So you-
2012 warrant, we had stockpiled
To
this
put it
money.
back in the operating budget? So you're saying that of the 2.7, 800,000 is going to operations and the rest is going for one-time money, or the rest is?
So here it is, Tom, up in the upper right-hand corner.
No, I see that, yeah.
So this 871,000 will go towards operating expenses. It's already part of this 86,153,562 in cell B7, right there. It's already in there.
Well, yeah, it is, because the 2.7's in there, so yeah, it is.
Right, it's in there.
I'm
So-
just confused as to why you're segregating it, because,
I'm just, actually, it's an educational exercise. I want to show people what's happening.
because ultimately, the whole 2.7's going down and available, not 1.8, really.
Well, 2.7 is our total initial one-time money. 871 of that, we're going to put into operating funds from our Article 29 from last year's warrant.
Yeah. And the other 1.8
Well, the other
is
1.829
not
will
going
be
to
used,
operating it?
that'll be used for one-time money.
Sure.
So for
Okay, that's my
example,
question. Strictly one time.
articles, capital not bonded, and additional RFT requests for fiscal 13. So
Okay,
that's-
okay. I mean, if that's the plan, then I agree with that, and...
I hope this is a good kind of picture. I try to get it all on one
Okay.
page.
Yeah, it just wasn't clear why you would separate out the 8 from the 1.8. But if that's the plan, to use the 1.8 as just strictly one-time money, then I understand, I agree with that. Joe
Lynch, do you want to talk about Central Ave?
Did you want to take a no vote on the stabilization article? Or no recommendation?
withdraw it. I'm going to try and see if I can just pull it out. Because we've already retracted one of ours.
Asked you if you can make a motion. But you're gonna have to put it in.
So you want to tell us about the appropriation?
Excuse me, the one-time requests?
Yes.
Sure. I think everybody saw the memo that I sent on dated December 17th. In that, I prioritized 8 individual items. And in parallel to this, there was the Capital Improvement Committee vetting some of my other requests in a parallel sense. So right off the bat, my first priority item that I've recommended so I suggested using one-time money has been funded under the CIP, so we can strike that from my request.
Okay.
Similarly,
Sorry,
with-
which one?
Like a phase 1, DPW.
Phase 1.
$1 million.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're
I
talking
think
about
we-
the big one here.
I think the subcommittee winnowed down your priorities to...
Okay, I haven't seen what those are. Okay, that's where I'm at a disadvantage.
The subcommittee of the warrant committee suggested that we focus on those 3 items.
Okay.
And they were priority one, your reflectivity sign assessment.
Because that's
study.
now, okay, got it.
Okay. Number two, I believe, was trees.
Tree
for
replacement.
10,000.
Thank you.
And number three was repairing hazardous sidewalks.
I would hope you would have said sidewalks. Okay, great, great.
He's not saying we voted on them yet.
We haven't voted
Just
on
prioritized.
it, but the subcommittee narrowed
To be clear,
your laundry list down to.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that I'd got to that point yet. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So we spoke about the retroreflectivity earlier this evening. If there's any more information needed on that, I can provide that. And the reality is, it's a federal mandate under Federal Highway Administration for our signs. It requires that we have a plan, and in order to have a plan, we have to have an inventory. This allows us to carry out that inventory.
so Joe, right now we're speaking to the Central Ave appropriation. Central Ave.
Oh, these are special articles, I'm sorry. Okay,
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I read all the things in the wrong order before. Go ahead.
We're aware that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee put $1 million towards this project, or is thinking of doing it. I presume the selectmen accepted that report, but I don't know.
They did, they voted that Thursday evening, $1 million. This past Thursday evening.
So this had also been introduced as an article, perhaps to cover that situation if the selectmen hadn't approved that expense.
I believe it's moot at this point, and I guess what exactly your question is. There was some concern at town meeting raised from the floor last year about the condition of Central Avenue, and the thought was to attack the Chapter 90 appropriation and funnel all of that money into Central Ave. I think it was done, hopefully, mostly as a demonstration of just for the need, and what came out of that was a willingness to come back and report to town meeting again what the status was, and to pursue other financing opportunities. Doing that, we brought the project back to the Capital Improvement Committee. It is a $1.4 million project, which includes a 20% contingency, which in a planning condition, that's where it's at. We took it out of the Federal Highway Administration realm and brought it back into the local Milton realm, meaning that the whole robust specification that's associated with the Federal Highway Administration honestly borders on ridiculous for what we can do with our own local spec, which is very, very adequate. It meets the Mass Highway spec. It also allows us to use contractors that we have in place on recurring annual contracts, and what we call service contracts, the reclaiming, the milling, the grading, the paving, and the various, setting of structures, installation of curbing and sidewalks. Those are all contracts we have in place. They're known numbers. The quantities are pretty well studied because of the work we had done pursuing the federal highway money. So what it boils down to is we took a $3.4 million federal project, including contingency, that was really a $3.1 million federal project, and we brought it into the realm of what's really a $1.4 million project. With that 1.4, like I said, it includes 20% contingency, it includes a $100,000 allowance for traffic control and police details. So in reality, we're looking at something that's on the verge of a 1.15 million dollar project. To do the 1 million project as recommended by the Capital Committee, we would have to cut out installation of any new curbing, granite curbing on this project. We'd eliminate it. But what's there will be reset. There won't be installation of any new sidewalks, which one of the objectives of the project was to provide sidewalks on both sides of the street. But the overriding objective was to provide focused pedestrian safety to two strategic crossing locations, one at Hinckley and one at Valley. This project still proposes to do that. So by backing out the curbing and backing out the new sidewalk, we can bring this project in for $1 million. We can. It also doesn't preclude coming back. It's an additional cost in the future, but it doesn't preclude the possibility of coming back in the future, adding new sidewalk in those areas later on, and curbing in those areas later on. So It's pressed. I mean, at this point, you can probably whittle a 20% contingency down to 10%, and backing out those items, we're confident we can bring this in for $1 million.
Great.
And we don't need this other article, standalone article.
Great.
Donna?
Any other question? I just gonna make a motion.
Okay, any other questions or discussion?
I make a motion for zero appropriation for this article.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Joe.
I'm sorry about the confusion on those other things, but my wish list was so deep, I really wanted. But Ted said that hasn't been voted yet. So should I hang around?
It'll be Wednesday night.
I'll be back.
All right, cemetery land purchase.
That's just,
As we saw earlier, when we were looking at the revenues, if you look at cell H63, we show a donation of $175,000 to the town.
You said on the right side, Kevin.
Okay. So we have it, we do have it funded, and this is just taking it out of the budget. So is there any discussion on this appropriation? No?
Let's make a motion that we take $175,000 and put it towards the purchase of the new cemetery. Right.
Second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right. Housing production plan? Tom, is that you? Oh, was that the planning board? Okay. All right, let me just get back to where I was. Okay, we've been asked by the town administrator in recognition, interim town administrator, in recognition of many requests that had come to her for extra money for fiscal year 13 reserve fund transfers. She went to all the departments and asked all of you what money you thought you would need to get you through the rest of this year for emergency situations. So I have a tab that's show you some of the math behind this. This is a little bit tricky. But if you remember, if you look at cell C23, that was our original fiscal year 13 reserve fund appropriation. At the town meeting, we voted $198,278 to be added to that. That was for the demolition of the Henrys. That was set aside for the Henrys demolition. A total of $448,278. Since that time, we've appropriated money for $1,300 to the Board of Health for a heater, $21,484 to the clerk for polling booths, $20,865 to Verizon for, it's actually taxes, $125,000 set aside for the police department for bi-transmission equipment. The way we did that, we had to, the Board of Selectmen came back to us and asked us to rescind our $198,000 vote and instead to put $125,000 into the bi-transmission and keep the balance of $73,278 set aside for Henrys. So right now, the remaining balance in our reserve fund transfer, in our reserve fund is $206,351. So if you look at column D, these are the additional reserve fund transfer requests that have been given to the Warrant Committee. $4,000 for the assessor, professional services, additional elections, $45,000, repairs to fire engine, $43,000, law bills in excess of its current budget, $80,000, police coverage for the elections of $14,000, police department gas, $26,000. We need to replenish the fund for $125,000 for the Henrys demolition, which we appropriated to the police department for the bi-transmission equipment, and $50,000 for our unemployment claims in excess of what we have budgeted. So the total that we haven't paid out yet is $387,000, including all those new RFTs. We have 206,351 left. So we need $180,649 allocated to the reserve fund for fiscal year 13 expenses. So, with discussion?
I just gonna make a motion that we take $180,000 of one-time money, move it towards RFT payments for fiscal year 13.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor? Opposed? Okay. And that's it for tonight. If you want to see the presentation at this point. So we're at 54. So out of one-time money that we had, 1.829 million, we've allocated 180,649 for additional 2013 reserve fund transfer requests, 1.175 million for one-time articles, which leaves us $473,411 for one-time department requests. So this will be voted Wednesday night.
Plus additional articles we didn't vote tonight.
Yeah, I
right?
was wondering, Jean, if the committee felt that maybe we could vote the other two articles. I know Emily's not here, but I feel like we've kind of heard the articles, and then that way we're able to go.
I really hate to, without giving Emily a chance to discuss it. I think in all fairness. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you. See you Wednesday.